Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the hour of 6 o'clock, and I'd like to welcome you to the full council meeting of the Derbyshire District Council in the council chamber. The date is the 27th of July 2023. Just to let you know a bit of housekeeping first, and I'm not going to do a hostess, but if there's a fire, there's no fire drills planned, but if you wish to go that way and follow the route that you came in and then meet in this area down here just outside. And for those other people, we are videoing for YouTube and other social media. So if you don't want to be recorded, if you could let us know. I know there are two speakers over there, and they will take the relevant action. So we'll move along. And first of all, it's apologies for absence, and I'll ask Tommy or Lucy to let us know who those people are, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Buttle, Buckler, Burton, G, Morley and Wilton.
Thank you very much. We do have public participation. There are two people that have kindly come to speak this evening. And I've explained the protocol about going over to the table. So would Deborah Short, works with resident, please go and speak first. Would Mr. Peter Walton, who works with relevant resident, please speak first? Thank you. That's it. That's it.
Okay. My name is Peter Walton, resident in Wirksworth. We're attending this meeting to demand a survey by the accredited and truly independent radio frequency microwave engineer of our choosing of the microwave radiation pollution being emitted by the cell tower which has been erected on Miller's Green in Wirksworth, within very close proximity to housing and sports facilities. Many of the taxpayers of Wirksworth, including the 160 signers of our petition, are aware of the indisputable hazard to health which tens of thousands of scientific studies conducted over the past 30 years conclude are the result of microwave radiation. This tower is now sited on council-owned land just over the hedge from the sports facilities used by the very clubs who rejected a sizable sum of money in return for having the mast on their land. Domestic housing is only tens of metres from the mast. Children and young people who have been shown to be particularly vulnerable to harm from radiation living nearby and playing sport are currently being exposed. This council has a duty of care to protect the public and environment from the exposure to harm. The council cannot get insurance cover for microwave damage, which leaves the probable issuance of individual notices of liability. Whilst there are no studies which show that RFR, i.e. radiation, is harmless, there are literally tens of thousands of peer-reviewed studies demonstrating the hazards resulting from radiation. We've supplied data, which you have in front of you, I think, showing that government guidelines, which are an industry standard and not safety guidelines, are woefully outdated and inadequate, having been compiled during the 1980s and 90s, when the only hazard from RFR was considered to be cellular heating. There is no safe level of microwave radiation. These guidelines produced by the corporate-influenced ICNIRP, i.e. the International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, were based upon exposure for no longer than 1 hour in rats and monkeys only. This tower is emitting radiation 24/7. What's more, damage done through microwave radiation is cumulative. It doesn't go away when you move away from the affected area, but remains to be added to with the next exposure.
You've got 30 seconds left, thanks.
We have measured the radiation power density for this tower at 38,000 microwatts per square metre. And as with all cell towers, the level changes all the time. The radiated power is modulated, meaning that it spikes up to 1,000 times a second, like a jackhammer on the central nervous system and the brain. This is unlike the domestic microwave oven, although often of the same frequency. The modulation is what our bodies, animals, plants, insects, and even microscopic life cannot cope with. Microwave radiation is an effective insecticide. That's proven. Our measurements have been made with good quality amateur meters, and we are now demanding confirmation of radiation levels with professional equipment, since this was never done when the tower was commissioned in 2019. 15 other councils in the UK and Ireland have announced a moratorium on cell towers and Wi-Fi technology under a precautionary principle until RFR is proven safe. Why are we in Derbyshire not afforded the same duty of care? Why has no one in our council truly heard our objectives, despite our considerable efforts during the past year? Councillors are meant to be advocates, and it's high time that you honour your duties in this respect and advocate on our behalf.
Can you bring it to a close now, please?
As it is, we have spent a great many hours and not an inconsiderable amount of money and time in pursuing this matter brought about by our action in citing your action in citing the tower on council land. On the other side of the sheet, you'll see an analysis of the energy consumption of these towers.
Thank Mr. Walton. I've given you a little bit longer, but I'm going to have to call you.
Right, I'll just finally
no,
say...
can you stop?
I can finally say, no, I will say this.
Can you just, Mr. Walton, can you please, your message has been heard. We've got rules, and I have been very lenient. You've had approximately 4 minutes. So can you please vacate the seat, and we'll listen from Miss Short, Deborah Short. Thank you. Miss Short, can you put your case forward, please? Thank you.
Okay, so just to finish off some of what Peter couldn't say. Finally, the other side of your sheet demonstrates that cell towers are far from eco-friendly, currently consuming electricity equivalent to 380,000 homes and increasing year on year. We suggest that this council also considers their position regarding compliance with its ecology policy and with its biodiversity plan. The county states that ecology has to be considered when a planning application...
Ms. Short, can you just go a bit close to the microphone, please, because some of the members are not able to hear you. Thank you.
Could you hear any of that? No. Right. So, finally, I'm finishing off what Peter couldn't say here. The other side of your sheet demonstrates that cell towers are far from eco-friendly, currently consuming electricity equivalent to 380,000 homes and increasing year on year. We suggest that this council also considers their position regarding compliance with its own ecology policy and with its biodiversity plan, which states ecology has to be considered when a planning application is being determined. This includes considering the potential impact of developments on habitats, wildlife, protected species and designated sites. And I repeat, says Peter, microwave radiation is an effective insecticide. So what we would like to see is a prioritisation of fibre to the premises, which is safer, more secure. I want to come away from this meeting with something tangible, because for the past year now, Peter and I have been speaking to all sorts of councillors, local MP, in my case, even Julia Lopez, who's Minister of State for Digital Infrastructure. And again and again and again, we put all this energy and time into trying to be heard, and nothing comes back. We're not talking about mere opinions, we're talking about facts and evidence and science. This is peer-reviewed science. I'm not one of those scientists, but I am bright enough to be able to read what they're saying, and what they're saying is desperately alarming. So, back to our demand is for an independent hazard assessment. That's what we need to happen. That would be the brilliant tangible to go away from this meeting with an agreement to. But also work with us to lobby for a moratorium on any future implementation of radiation emitting infrastructure until the health hazards are properly addressed. Work with us to change the ridiculous idea within planning that health risks are not a a material planning consideration. An assurance from you that is minuted that the meeting is beginning to grasp the gravity of the mounting catastrophe that we are alerting you to. An agreement to schedule another meeting in so that we can go into more depth on this matter and share what we have learned. It doesn't need to be a full council meeting, perhaps 2 or 3 of you. So we've had correspondence already with Councillors Hughes, Slack and Murphy. You know, if we could meet and just share with you more of what we have learned, that would be brilliant as well.
You've got 30 seconds
All
there,
right.
thank you.
And 2 questions. I read in a recent newsletter, Derbyshire Dales District Council has been described as a pioneer beacon authority as it prepares to drive its innovative biodiversity project into a 3rd year. So the question is, how does the council's disregard for the proven harmful environmental impacts of radiation pollution fit with the council's biodiversity plan? Second question, given that insurance companies exclude liability coverage from harm from RF and EMF wireless radiation, who will be liable in the case of a claim? And a quote, I'm going to close with a quote from Dr. Martin Paul from Washington State University, expert in this field. Putting tens of millions of 5G antennae without a single biological test of safety has got to be about the stupidest idea anyone has had in the history of the world.
Thank you very much. Would you please, you and Mr. Walton, if you were to send those or speak with your district councillors, Councillor Slack, and send me a copy of those, I'll have a read of them. It's just that we're very restricted on time. Right. But thank you very much for taking the time to come, both of you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Moving on, we're going on to interest now. Members are required to declare the existence and nature of any interest they may have in subsequent agenda items in accordance with the District Council's Code of Conduct. Those interests are matters that relate to money or that which can be valued in money, affecting the member, his or her partner, extended family and close friends. Interests that become apparent at a later stage in the proceedings may be declared at that time. Does anybody wish to declare any interest, please? That's no. Right, we're now put the leaders' announcements, and I'll let Councillor Flitter speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I take it that is Councillor Slack going to give the message from Councillor Burton now? Or
I'm afraid I haven't got anything from Councillor Burton.
Well, I'll just say at the start of the meeting then, Chair, that Councillor Burton isn't with us tonight because he's been taken ill again, and he may have to have another hospital stay. But he does want to keep in touch with people. He does want to let you know what he's been doing in the meantime, but he hopes to be back with us very soon. Thank you. On the leaders' announcements tonight, I'm not going to keep you long because we've got an agenda which has got some difficult decisions to be made. But we have had a busy month, 6 weeks since the last meeting, but we have been accused in certain directions that we're not meeting up to the challenge. So I thought on this occasion, I'll just let you know how busy we have been on this council since the last meeting. You'll note that we did take a fresh look, as promised, at the local plan, and that was taken to C&E and agreed on all sides of this chamber. We've also produced a paper on pollution and one on biodiversity. In progress that we're still working on are the public conveniences, the Gypsy and Traveller group, and I will say on that, because I have had emails on that, I will not be rushed or interfere with anything that the subgroup is doing in condition with the Gypsy and Traveller situation. That's for them to come to this council with recommendations, and we will all take a decision in that. We're looking at economic development and partnership working. And we've got yet to begin, which is next, a housing policy and a corporate plan where meetings have been rearranged. I also hope
to look at the Leaders Advisory Group on how we can develop that into a more meaningful group session, and also with the JCG. I'm looking at how we can develop that so we can be closer to our staff. On partnerships, we've had a real buzz. We went to the LGA conference in Bournemouth, and there were some very interesting discussions on waste collection, on leisure, on planning, housing, and I brought back two schemes that I took real interest in. And one was the Sutton Green Enterprise, which combines development with climate action under a one planet, one borough situation, where placemaking and the green transition, a new generation of businesses with one-to-one dedicated support and recovering the costs of granting discounts on rate support through a pilot discussion and expansion of schemes giving business rate relief of up to 70%. And that's if there's a 5% reduction in the carbon, which is reduction is achieved. I also brought back a paper for our officers to discuss on the North Tyneside Pledge. And that's an approach of a community wealth building, encouraging local businesses and organisations to commit to taking steps to boost the local economy, reduce health, inequalities, reduce carbon emissions, and enhance civic pride. And I thought those were two very good schemes I want officers to look at. If we can adopt them and something like that, it's all well and good. If not, well, we've done our research. Most important thing on that was that the networking between members and officers throughout different parties, learning what everybody else is doing is a real eye-opener. And just to say that I was a speaker at one of the political fringe meetings. On the District Council network, you'll have seen that Baroness Taylor in the House of Lords on devolution amendment did put an amendment forward that all district councils become constituent members of the new devolution deal. It went through 162 to 157, so we're not looking at anything greatly from that. But the District Council network are really urging government to retain when discussed in the Commons after the recess. Coming down another level to East Midlands Council, I spoke up there for a fairer funding deal in rural districts, and I mentioned that the uncertainty and we need sustained finances. Down at county level, I attended the D2 Economic Prosperity Fund Committee, Vision Derbyshire County Deals and Devolution, where we're talking about the new mayoral and East Midlands combined authorities. More locally, we met with the new chair and CEO of the Peak Park, and we are trying to proffer a meeting with the members of Peak Park so we can all understand the difficulties that we faced over the previous years and where we can move forward in partnership. I also attended the Peak Park Partnership think tank where we were looking at the challenges and how we can deal with the challenges over the next year, and that was a very good meeting. I also looked at the National Stone Centre, which is an interesting project there, and I hope that does get off the ground. We hope to meet two hoteliers that have suggestions on the business economy, and we also want to put out our best to other leaders in the Dales on tourism and the local economy, because tourism is a major factor in our economy. On a slightly down note, I have to say that we had a meeting with our MP. It was not a good meeting. We were we were said that we were a small council, not equipped to meet challenges, and that's been polite on. But I felt that the meeting was negative and unhelpful, and I wasn't alone in thinking that. But the door is always open. It's a new beginning, and I want to make sure that that door is open to everybody. We've also had the problems in Ashbourne where you've got on the agenda tonight, which we need support, and also we've been dealing with the floods in Matlock and all over the district, and that takes time up from our officers and getting involved. So, you know, this council has not been idling its way over the past few months. To conclude, I just want to say a big thank you to our park staff in achieving the Green Flag Awards. I think that is a marvellous thing. We in Bakewell and in Matlock. Ashbourne just missed out, and I think there's an appeal going on there. And finally, just to conclude, Chair, I believe that one of our members of staff, James, is about to leave us. This is his last meeting with us. And I have to say, James, since you arrived, you've been a breath of fresh air. You've been welcomed by all members, and I hope all members of staff. Your contribution to this council has been unquestionable. Your professionalism has been unquestionable, and we should be very, very sad to lose you. Although we can't stand in your way of progression and your promotions, we just wish you to stay with us a bit longer. But I thank you, James, and I'm sure others would like to contribute to say thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter. I'd like to echo those comments as well in relation to Mr. McLaughlin. He's been a big help trying to manipulate me into this job. But we move on to item 6, and our best wishes do go to Councillor Burton. Item 6 is committees, and we're asked to receive the non-exempt minutes on the committees shown below. There are a number of them. It's the Council on the 2nd of March, the Governance and Resources on the 8th of March, Planning Committee. The list is there. I'm sure you've all had a chance to have a look at them. Would anybody like to move these en bloc? Councillor Hughes? Yeah, Councillor Hughes is moving. Does anybody like to second those? Councillor Murphy? And can we vote on it that we accept the, well, Councillor O'Brien? Oh, that's good. So anyway, so we're going to receive those. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Any against? Abstentions? No, carried unanimously. We'll move on to, well, item 7. I understand there are no questions. There's no questions. Now we'll move on to item 8, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. We're asked to approve these. This is from the meeting on the 25th of May. Has everybody had opportunity to have sight of these minutes? Would anybody like to approve them? Councillor Wakeman. Second, Councillor Slack. All those in favour, please. Against? Any abstentions? Councillor Boynton. So that's just one abstention. It's carried, yes, that's carried. Thank you. We now move on to the Clean and Green review, which is item 9. This report is outlines the work of to date on the review of the Council's Clean and Green service and recommends recommendations which were deferred by the Council from the 16th of March. This report will be presented by Ash Watts, the Director of Community Environment, and Samantha Grisman, the Clean and Green Manager. If you'd like to present your report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it brief. As Councillor Wayne quite rightly points out, this is a report with some recommendations that were deferred from the last meeting of Council in March this year. There were a series of recommendations that were put forward. and it was agreed in that meeting that some of them would be debated and approved based on the time sensitivity of them and also addressing the current capacity issues that we were experiencing. There is an update on the progress of those recommendations which were approved by members in the background of this report. However, the report itself is looking for approval on a series of recommendations that we've put in front of you. The main one is that members are asked to approve funds to help us finalise the structure that's included in the appendices for the restructure of the service. In the main, you will notice that we are moving away from a north, south and central approach to delivering the service to a service-based approach, which will include teams for parks, teams for mowing, street cleansing and burials and playground inspections. The reason for this is after much deliberation and discussion with our consultants, with the workforce, of which there have been extensive periods of consultation, both on a one-to-one basis with individual teams and with the whole workforce. Those discussions have been facilitated either by the management team, by our HR team, or with external consultants. So we do feel that we've got a fair assessment of how the teams feel that the service can work, as well as adding our own input into that. We want to do this because we feel that it will give some consistency across the district. I often have discussions with members where there is a perception or a feeling that some areas get serviced more than others. And just to use an example of this would be parks and cemeteries. We are looking for those teams. They will operate across the whole district, whereas at the moment you have a parks team in Matlock, one in Ashbourne, so on and so forth. So it's to provide some consistency, not just in terms of frequency, but also in terms of standards. We also are acknowledging the fact that in the last review, 2011-12, that review had a focus on efficiencies and cost savings. It was a period of austerity. We've been very clear from the off with this review, and this is for the benefit of the newer members. This was about improving the service. We had to be sensible with the funds that we were asking for, but we do believe that this approach will give an improvement to the service, not only to the end user or visibly across the district, but also in terms of managing the service, the better use of data, and the better use of the resources that are available to us. Well, some of the feedback that came back from staff was in the last review, there was the introduction of multi-skilled posts. Essentially, most of the posts moved to multi-skill, which led to a loss of pride or feeling that they had a specialist role within the team. We're trying to restore that by introducing these teams to allow us to give a development pathway for the teams, focused development and training for those teams, but essentially to make sure that we get that consistency across the district. And that is something that we hear loud and clear from members. We also are asking for members to support our ongoing discussions with colleagues at the County Council in the removal or reduction or ceasing to use glyphosate on the Derbyshire County Council's highway contract within the Derbyshire Dales. For members who aren't aware, the District Council no longer uses glyphosate on our land unless it's to do with invasive species. And we want to try and encourage or persuade our colleagues at County Council to take the same approach. And finally, in order to monitor progress and performance on the review, we would like to retain the project team, which are outlined in the main body of the report, and also a members working group for the first year, so we can then report back on progress. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would anybody like to ask any questions? Councillor Hughes?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, a question about the change in the structure from an area to a function-based structure. Then I've got a question about the Derbyshire County Council's use of glyphosate. So in terms of the change in structure, I can see quite clearly that there will be a benefit in terms of skills and focusing on skill development and so on, and that is to be supported. The only issue I see though is that there may be a more travel time involved. Will that occur, or is it going to be evened out?
Good question. So this is one we've gone back and forward on a little bit, but I think what we've got to look at is not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So what we've got to do is make sure that our skills in certain areas are up to those services. So we haven't just got kind of one service in each of those areas. We've got a headline service, and there's a certain amount that cover within those. For examples, the bins and the toilet. So they're two services that might split over two of our function services, so that we get the best. So we're not having to do that. So we are splitting some that would fit better within more than one service. So we're trying to balance that out, but ultimately we're making sure that the service is, like I said, provided in a consistent way across the district. So they've already got a certain amount of travel that they already commit to with the breadth of our dales. Okay,
thank you very much. So I gather that then you've got that, taking that into account and planning it accordingly. On the second question, I've noticed where Derbyshire County Council has sprayed on themselves on their own land, for example around County Hall, the result has been bare earth, and the consequence of that has been runoff in the storms that we've had, leading to gullies on their land. Can we evidence this to the County Council as a reason for stopping use of glyphosate and stopping the killing off of wild plants rather than perhaps weeds along verges and other areas?
That's the first time that's come to me, to be honest. So I can report that to them and see what they say, and I'll report back to you, Councillor. I haven't been reported to that.
Is that the footpath from Edgefold Road up towards the car parks?
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Maelstrom.
Thank you. Yes, my question concerns the street cleaning and public litter bin collections in the villages. Samantha will be aware that a large part of what I get asked to do by my residents is to request additional street cleaning in the villages over the summer, in the week before their particular village events, such as well dressing or open gardens or whatever. The new regime at 216 says that there will be 2 street sweeps a year, with additional ones only on a safety basis. And I'm just wondering whether the villages will have any input into when their street sweeping takes place, so that they can make sure that the villages look the best for the big event in the individual village.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that one up. This is one of those that I think goes back into the standards that we're expected to do, and then the standards that we want to provide for the community. If we feel like we can do that, and where we can manoeuvre. If there's areas where that simply isn't within our remit, that's going to have to be considered as a chargeable service. So if we're able to be, and I think I've spoken to you about it, may not others appreciate that we have 2 road sweepers and 2 footpath sweepers for the whole of the district. So considering actually how slow they can have to move when they're working, we just can't be everywhere all at once. So I think we've got to make sure that in terms of the inspections, that my supervisors are out with the parish and town district, knowing when those events are, and where we can support, we always try to. And we've also got hotspots areas over the summer and seasonal trends. But I think moving forward, that can be something that's a chargeable service for parish councils and town councils to then request and have in as a commercial aspect.
Mr. Watts, do you want to add something?
Chair, if I may just come in on that point, just to reiterate something Sam had said there. We often get peak times where we're asked for services, where a number of villages, parishes or towns will ask. Well dressings, for example, is a really busy time for us, and every parish council wants us to be in their village around the same time. So we do have to have a set schedule, but as Sam quite rightly says, we will help where we can, but it's not always possible, and that's simply the reason, because we get such a demand on top of the usual schedule, and we do have a finite amount of resources to manage that schedule.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martin Burford, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I refer you to page 22 and 23 on paragraph 220? Ash did mention invasive species like Japanese knotweed, which will be continue to be treated by glyphosate, but the other noxious weed that's very invasive is mare's tail. And there's a good example of that, in fact, next to the exit from the bus station, the centre of Matlock, adjacent to the little car park. And it's certainly encroaching further than it was. Well, it's encroaching all the time. It's going into the car park, beyond the car park, and it's very difficult to eliminate. It's been a problem on the Matlock allotments, for instance, and it's spreading from one plot to another. I think that's, if you can agree, that's another weed that needs to be controlled by means other than hand removal or any other methods. I've got another question as well. Do you want to deal with that one first? Right, okay, well, the second one's the same page, 227. I'm interested to see that you're quoting various sites, the Town Hall, public footpath at Starcombs, I'm not sure which that one is, Art Leisure Centre, Derwent Gardens, I'm not sure, is that the Century Garden? I'm not quite sure where that is, and Dollydale Cemetery. And it's interesting to see the extra time that you estimate will be involved without using glyphosate. But I might ask why you've done that exercise if we've already agreed not to use glyphosate, and how much extra time is it going to require, or how many new extra staff is it going to require to carry out the same sort of service throughout the district, particularly on those sites that you mentioned?
Through you, Chair. So yes, I consider the first question fine. If we've got more invasive species, that's just an example for the paper. So all invasive species can be considered with glyphosate, obviously, thanks to the approval in council. So actually, that chart on 2.27 isn't estimates. That's actually what time it's taken. So this is the time that it's taken. So it was just to highlight there that where we have got, because we are seeing increasing weeds. I don't think we'll all disagree with that. I think we have got an increased amount of weeds, weeds or wildflowers, depending on who you're speaking to. And I think we just got to consider that. So when we're having requests from residents, members, parish councils for the weeds, we have to appreciate that this has given us a new challenge to work with. We're very, we're up for the challenge, but it's just to highlight that we're talking about hours to days. We're not talking about hours to double hours. This is, we really are shifting the way we work. So just to ask for some support when we have got complaints coming in our teams. We haven't increased the team yet to deliver this level of service. So we are seeing that increase. So that table was just to really bring to the attention of councillors that is what we're having to deal with.
Thank you, Samantha.
I was asking about Derwent Gardens, whereabouts that is, because it's in Matlock, but I know where Derwent Gardens is as a road, as a cul-de-sac, but not an actual garden.
Derwent Gardens in Matlock Bath.
Matlock Garden. Oh, that one. Oh, sorry, right. Yeah, right.
Eliminations, that one.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying that, Samantha. Councillor Shelley, please.
Thank you. Yes, I've just got three questions. One of them is a follow-up to Councillor Hughes there. I notice in the environmental impact of the report, it states that there aren't any unforeseen or untoward impacts of the proposals. I fully understand the points that are being made about the attractiveness of making the roles more fulfilling and more effective, but just as a follow-on from the travel time question, does that also impact? Has there been an assessment of the impact in terms of cost of travel and environmental impact of travel as well?
Joe Hill has considered that in terms of the report, we get it considered by legal, finance and environmental procedures. At the moment, there isn't going to be that much more travel. So if you can think about the burials team are already scouting across those, and we have bases in our main areas. So we have a base at Bakewell, a base at Ashbourne and a base in Matlock. So in our main remit, and where you're really increasing fuel is how much you're carrying. So we're making sure that these areas have the capacity to hold our heavier plant material, so we're not having to distribute those throughout the district, and we've got those more locally. I think there is another piece of work to do on that. I think you're right. I think the next project after this, when we conclude this one, is looking at the decarbonisation of the fleet and where we go with that and what that looks like. You may be aware that we've got charging points coming into the depot following car park, so it's something that will merge into that report, but no, it hasn't been identified here.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of other quick queries as well. I see am I right in understanding that on page, I think it's page 45, Appendix E, it looks like a good news story. I mean, I hope it is, that the mowing regime is moving to a weekly rota. Is that correct? Do I understand that right?
No, it shouldn't say that.
Oh dear.
The proposal for cemeteries has moved to fortnightly. So that's if you do approve the additional funds for 2 extra members of the team within the burials and play areas. That's a certain area of service where we appreciate the aesthetics are very sensitive in a cemetery, and it's been an area of concern for previous members, parish councils and residents alike. So that's an area where we are not choosing to reduce them, we're actually choosing to increase. But like I say, that is dependent on the approval of the funds to be able to provide that service.
Okay, thank you. And finally, this is just a general query, I suppose, about, and you may not have the answer here in front of me. It may even be one which the county council is better able to answer. But the 72 areas of Pathfinder scheme within the district, I couldn't see a document which led me to find where those were. Is that something which is possible to point members and the public to a little bit more clearly, please?
Yeah, apologies. Sorry, I haven't included that, have I? Sorry, my apologies. I will send that out to all members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lees.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, are we any closer to finding an alternative solution other than what we stated in the report for a weed killer? Because it's looking like we're going to lose quite a lot of hours, or considerable amount of hours, by what we're going to gain. We're going to be losing those hours in pulling weeds up by hand, and I think we just need a solution other than what we've got in the report that's could do with something that takes the same amount of time as the system that we're already using or been using, and it's just going to prove very costly as we're going forward. What we're hopefully approved tonight, it's going to be lost up in a lot of this work, by getting rid of these weeds. I would just like to say that we have had, well, I'm certainly getting quite a few reports coming in now on the pavements, particularly with the weed situation. And going back to Councillor Flitter's opening remarks about the Green Flag Award, yes, Ashbourne were very close, and I'd like to thank the Clean and Green team, because Ashbourne Park has never looked as good as it does at the moment. It's the Clean and Green team, the Parks team, have worked exceptionally hard to get it to the standard that it is now, and it's a credit to them all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Lees, for that. The appeal is still in process, so I'm still hopeful. But yeah, we'll let you know when the result comes through of that. It's a good question in terms of alternatives. I think we've got to be realistic about what is out there at the moment. The report speaks about the hot foam, which was only made available to hire as of January this year. So we made sure that we've trialled that already in the equivalent amount of time that we'd spend on spraying. So that'll come back in September. Once that trial has been completed, I'll come back to you with a report on what that looks like. And that might look like we will be using that more often than glyphosate. It might be that you will enable us to buy that certain machine. It might be that we don't feel like that's feasible and we have to come away. So where we are looking at trials, we are staying very active within the market to see what's out there. And I know it's an issue of all councils. We had a conversation with Warwick Council yesterday, really, about what's happening. And actually, for every year that you don't treat weeds with a certain glyphosate, you're actually getting it worse and worse because you're not treating it systemic. But that does not mean that it's not a challenge we're not readily available to address. I am one person that thinks the difference between a weed and a wildflower is its location. So maybe it's about education and community and getting involved where we absolutely have to use it. Maybe that's a consideration. So there's going to be more information about that in the coming financial year. So I'm hoping the same as you, that we get another alternative that's able to assist my teams in the way we want this district to look.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Chair. And I'd like to say thank you to Ashley and Sam for an excellent and well-considered report. I'd just like also to say kind of very proud that kind of we've got 2 parks that have achieved Green Flag Award and Ashbourne coming so close. But part of me does fear that the dedication that we put into those parks to achieve those wards is coming at the cost of other areas in our district. So I just wonder whether the plan you've presented to us today will look to provide better equity across all of our parks, across the whole district, and that maybe we'll see one of Matlock Bath's parks awarded a Green Flag Award.
Completely agree. Yes, Derwent Gardens will be next on our list. And going back to why we've got service areas, that's exactly what we want. I don't know that we need to reevaluate every single park, but I think we need to speak to the communities, yourselves and the parish councils, of what's being used for what, because without consulting, we don't know how much use these small parks are having. And we had those discussions when we were talking about biodiversity areas, and areas we thought weren't being used as much actually were there for perhaps football pitches for kids when they're coming home, or a picnic area for the local estates. We've really got to understand what these green spaces mean to the locals, but whether we're calling it a park, a verge, a green space, or a public amenity space. There's lots of different rows, and I think it's important that we establish that, and then we make sure that we've got standards on each level of those parks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Flitter, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at 2, 7, 8 and 9, and where we talk about current course standards and frequencies that were established in 2012. And it seems pretty clear that during the writing this report, it's been noted that those targets were unachievable and unrealistic. And I just want to know, because in 2.8 you do talk about capacity, and that is where we do get a lot of questions about capacity, and again, where gets treated, where doesn't get treated. So I'm wondering if this report actually answers those questions of capacity, and whether the report notes that those targets and frequencies are level to expectations that we can achieve. The other thing on 2.9 is that the verge mowing, we understand where the county actually coming from in one instance, and where we come from in rewilding. But I think all Matlock councillors certainly will have seen emails this week and today especially about Matlock Green, which is an urbanised area, the approach to Matlock, which looks very untidy. And we just want to know what the protocol is going to be on solving those sort of issues. Thank you.
Chair, if I can just pick up the first point, or the beginning of the response for the first point. One of the first one of the first discussions that I held with what was the environmental services team when I took on responsibility for Clean and Green was the frustration with the standards and frequencies that had been approved in 2011-12, because the workforce didn't believe that they were achievable. They set an expectation that couldn't be delivered upon, especially with the resources that we have available. So what we've tried to do in this review is look at those standards and frequencies and see where we can set realistic objectives and standards. And that's what we feel we're presenting to members this evening. And we've based that on the amendment to the structure and better utilisation of resources through service-led teams rather than area-based. So we've got better use of equipment and staff depending on what it is that we need to work upon. But also, you may have noticed some subtle changes. For example, if we had an area that we had in 2011-12, it was agreed that with the county council that we would do 7 cuts to verges, for example. There was a request at the time that members wanted an additional 3, which makes 9, which is incredibly difficult depending on the weather throughout the year. What we're proposing is that we do the 6, but we visit the other 3 times, for example. If it needs cutting, we will cut. If it doesn't need cutting and it meets the specification, it won't be cut, and allowing us to free up time to work on other areas. Another example of that could be sports pitches. In certain times of the year, depending on the weather, the staff will go out to a sports pitch that doesn't need cutting, but because of the policy that's in place, they're focused to do that work. Whereas now what we're saying is we'll do an inspection. If it doesn't need doing, it gives us some free time to focus on areas that do need those additional visits. So they are subtle changes. I appreciate that, but we spent a lot of time discussing this, and for the benefit of new members, this is a review that's taken nearly 3 years to conclude, partly because of COVID, but in the main it's been such a deep dive into the service of what we can realistically deliver. So I don't know if there's anything Sam wants to add to that point, but do you want to pick up the second one?
Sorry, just repeat the second question for me.
It was about the problems that the public are letting us know about Matlock Green, which is an entrance to the town and the Derbyshire Dales, and it is an urbanised area, but there is park cutting taking place, but there are huge swathes of vegetation that need attention. Just wondering what the protocol is.
I think that comes back to what other councillors have kind of mentioned. It's making sure that we understand what we define as a verge, green space, public areas, and what the residents and yourselves consider those, and how we're managing each level of that. And I think I agree with you. Areas that are coming, welcoming visitors and residents back to their home or into a certain area needs to be thought of in a different way. And if that's an area where we need to focus our attention a little bit more or do something a little bit differently, I think we're able to be willing to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Sue Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I notice on 2.28 that some members have raised concerns about the increasing weeds around the town hall. I will admit to being one of those councillors. But I've also mentioned the car park at Spa Villas. Now, when I go around the town, I look at Matlock Town Council planters, and if I see weeds at the bottom, then I pull them out. Now, I'm very tempted here to come here and pull them out, but I don't know what they've had on them. So I suppose the question is, well, no, should I do that? But, seriously, we could have a debate about what a weed is, can't we? And it seems to me that most people know when they're walking on Bank Road that there are weeds all along the base of the building. And I've never seen it without any weeds, to be honest. So is there any way that we could prioritise, well, certainly the town hall and also the car parks in our district where visitors come and, like Spa Villas, they look at it and they see planters and they see, a well-kept car park, and then there's weeds all over the place. Is there any way that we can prioritise those car parks, basically, and the town hall, please? And shall I pull them up?
I don't know if as an officer I can say yes to doing our work for us. Yes, we can. Okay, then thumbs up from James. Yeah. They'll come back, and they do come back, unfortunately. Yes. So through you, Chair.
Okay.
Car parks, as you'll see in the frequencies, that's actually something that I consider our neighbourhoods team an internal customer, and I'm working with Vicky and Ben very closely on what our car parks should be looking like, where we can take out a certain amount of the hedges and shrubbery if they are causing issues with parking. I think we've got to make sure that that first area of need is the parking spaces, and where we've got areas that are overtaken, especially permit holder areas, where we manage car parks in a different way. So that's a service-led agreement that we will share with you when Vicky and I have concluded what that should look like, especially our main ones. I think the issue with general weeds, and the same at the town hall, is the same with everywhere. If you actually wanted no weeds, I'd have teams there every 6 days, and I can't do that everywhere. So unfortunately, I can't prioritise. I have to be able to. Well, I suppose, it's unfortunately the same situation everywhere. If we wanted no weeds, they'd have to be with a rebreather for all the hands every 6 days to 2 weeks.
Can I just make it clear I'm not into taking hedges down? It's that. It's
No,
it's the
okay.
weed.
It's the yeah. I appreciate that, and yeah, I think it's the same discussion. We've just got to almost get used to this new challenge, and I haven't got staff enough to put people everywhere every 2 weeks to pull out weeds.
Thank you, Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. This is moving away from weeds to a different issue, dog feces. I'm noticing on page 43 about the litter bins dog bins. I'm particularly interested in this because a recent email from a parish council on my ward, Longford, have said one of their bins, dog bins, has been removed, and they weren't aware until it had actually been removed that it had gone. And I'm sure they've written to you about that to ask a question about why that is. But the question I have is, it says there that the dog bins will be replaced with full-size litter bins unless within 30 metres of full-size litter bins, removing existing dog bins adjacent to litter bins. Is that a kind of policy now that will affect a range of parishes and places where people walk their dogs? Will there be a reduction in dog bins? And if so, that would be a concern to me.
Through you, Chair. So the emails regarding Longford, they were sent at least 3 emails from a member of my team to say that we wanted to consult like we do with everywhere. So there were health and safety issues raised by my team, which I take very seriously. If you consider that my teams that's all they're doing all day, where we have got issues where they can't access them, they need to be taken seriously. The council was sent 3 emails which they didn't respond to. So we haven't removed it. We've moved it with the intention of replacing it somewhere else. So I'm currently waiting for a new area to be allocated or suggested to me, and then I will put it back. In terms of replacing dog bins with full size bins, that's just to increase capacity. So where we have got dog bins that were put across the council at certain times, actually they are causing issues themselves because you're then lifting them from a certain height. They need to be of a certain height, whereas there's no reason why dog feces can't go in a normal bin, and that's actually raising the capacity, enabling bins that are quite close to each other to be one area. So we're actually increasing capacity by doing that.
It's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Only this week, a local resident of mine at Baslow, an elderly lady who walks into the village, she's rung me because the weeds are so bad across the pavement. And then, of course, when there's wet weather, it's a safety issue for her. Would you respond to a specific complaint like that? Because I can just see these complaints are going to get worse, and public safety has got to be important. Thank you.
If you can send that specific complaint to me. So if it depends where the weed is. So if it's an undergrowth from a hedge that's going onto a footpath, that is county council's to deal with. If we do think it's something that we can deal with on their behalf to speed it up, I will always ask my team if we've got capacity to do it. If it's on the highway and it's between the highway and the footpath, that is on a sprayed area anyway, so it should be being sprayed. So if it's the pavement and then a hedge, that would be the county council's because it's growing from under a hedge. So if you, right, okay. So send that particular area to me. Great to get pictures as well if you can. I like pictures. And we'll see what we can do about that. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. So we've had some questions. Thank you. Would anybody like to, Councillor O'Brien, would you like to move? Yes, we are. What we're doing is we're going to have to move the items before we go into debate. Move second and then debate. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It gives me great satisfaction to move the recommendations as circulated earlier this afternoon and in front of you this evening. The outcomes of the review of our Clean and Green Service mark an important step forward in the commitment by Derbyshire Dales District Council to keep our parks, play areas, sports grounds, open spaces, roadside verges and cemeteries looking at their best all year round, and to keep our towns, villages and countryside free from litter. I hope our residents will notice the difference in the coming months. Can I thank all those who have contributed to the review process, not just our managers, but our trades union colleagues and our frontline staff. Working in partnership with all our employees is fundamental to the philosophy of the new administration. I would like to make special reference to the commitment by the Progressive Alliance that glyphosate will not be used by this council, and I hope this will be welcomed by all members. Putting the health of our residents, their children and grandchildren at risk, however small, is not something we are prepared to countenance. And we will be looking to bring our colleagues at Derbyshire County Council with us on this journey to an environment free from the hidden dangers of herbicides. Finally, it was back in October 2020 when members from the Labour, Green and Liberal Democrat groups joined forces to highlight the potential dangers of glyphosate and began the journey to end its use by this council. So I want to pay a special tribute to my colleague Councillor Steve Wayne for the leading part he played in this. Without his drive and determination, we would not have achieved what we are celebrating this evening. So thank you, Steve.
So you've moved the amended recommendations. Would that seek a seconder? Councillor Boothroyd, sorry.
Yes, I'll second that.
Right, so it's been moved and it's been seconded. Does anybody else wish to speak in the debate, please? Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm noticing and hearing a lot of people in the villages, when you go to parish council meetings, complaining about the state of the villages, with weeds growing on pavements and in other areas and whatever. Obviously, we've spoilt them over the years, and the villages have looked tidied, and the weeds haven't been out of control. But today, there's a lot more people complaining about the look of their villages. They obviously take pride in their villages, and they're frustrated. They're frustrated. I understand the decision that's been made, and I have spoken to a couple of gentlemen who are licensed to use that particular weed killer, and they were basically saying if there was something else that they could use, they would use it. So I understand we're looking at alternatives and whatever. I think it could be quite a long road at the moment, because you would think in this day and age there would be another range of products behind that glyphosate that you could use, but there doesn't seem to be anything as good. Key for me also is the damage that is now being done by these weeds to sort of pavements, dry stone walls that actually are on the boundaries, and there's weeds and there's brambles and there's all sorts of other items growing in those walls, and they're now starting to undermine those structures and whatever. So over the next few years, there's going to be other costs. It might not be our cost. It might be highways. It might be whoever's, but it is a consequence. I understand the dangers of glyphosate, but understand that there are people out there in some of the villages that are very disappointed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I can't support items 2 and 4 of this amendment because nothing that I've seen in a report or heard has given me reason to support that. Just to make one point clear, I'm a qualified agronomist and I've been working with glyphosate for 35 plus years. I've been trained in it. I've written hundreds of risk assessments for people using glyphosate on arable land on many thousands of hectares. And I have never experienced anybody having any kind of toxic reaction to glyphosate. And that includes people who are driving sprayers with a 36-metre boom width holding 10,000 gallons of glyphosate solution. So I haven't seen anything that tells me that it's a problem. The problem with the application of glyphosate is the same as the application of any herbicide, pesticide, insecticide, and it's the icide bit at the end that tells the story. It means to kill, and that's what these products are being used to do. But to follow the directions on the labels, to follow the protocol, and to make sure the operatives are trained, have the correct PPE, That is the important thing. And I will tell you the sector, ask yourselves which sector of society causes the biggest abuse of pesticide use. You do, right? You've all sprayed your roses for black fly. You've all put down those slug pellets. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people in this room have put down to stop those pesky slugs eating your lettuce patch. And what procedures do you carry out? In a professional sense, the containers are rinsed 3 times, they're double wrapped, and they're taken away by an agency that's geared up to take away that kind of hazardous material. No, you don't. You chuck it in your green bin, and that is the biggest risk for pesticide use in society today. Now, in toxicology, there's a statement that says the dose makes the poison, and it's the amount of toxicity that is present in a particular chemical. And I'll give you a couple of examples relative to glyphosate. Toxicity levels are measured as the first measurement is acute toxicity, and this describes the hazards associated with a single exposure to a chemical, right? Glyphosate has a lower acute toxicity than 94% of all known herbicides, right? It's in the very bottom. Of normal chemicals in the household, it is less toxic than vinegar and table salt. Caffeine is 400 times more toxic than glyphosate, right? It's down to the usage. It's down to how it's handled, and I'm very confident that our staff will be trained and will be equipped with the correct personal protective equipment. We mentioned invasive species. Invasive species are increasing in this country due to climate change all the time. We've got the Himalayan balsam, we've got the Japanese knotweed, we've got the new kid on the block, skunk cabbage. Look that up when you've got a minute. It sounds amusing, but it's on its way. So and I can tell you, being involved with the industry on a 7-day-a-week basis, there is no glyphosate substitutes on the horizon. We have to be aware that there are situations that we need to use it, and what we need to take into account, we need to, like we do with any risk assessment for herbicides, we need to look at wind conditions, we need to look at weather conditions, we need to look at public access. It's all down to the usage and the care taken in using it. The EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States, a couple of years ago did a survey on 57,000 American farmers, all using glyphosate. They found no evidence of cancer, they found no evidence of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Glyphosate has suffered over the years from a bad publicity department from Monsanto Chemicals. They've not been any good at all in putting the positive points of glyphosate. It's the most used herbicide in the world, and I will tell you what you've got to consider. It's a little bit off kilter, but on this planet, every day 25,000 people die of starvation, right? And the 3 staple crops that feed the world, which is wheat, maize and rice, they all rely on glyphosate to keep their yields up. For example, without glyphosate, wheat yields would generally suffer by a 30% reduction. And the paradigm in world food supplies has changed dramatically in the last 4 years. We're seeing, forget Ukraine, well, don't forget Ukraine, but in Ukraine, that's exacerbated the position. And the other thing is, if you're concerned about climate change, right, agriculture is one of the biggest carbon dioxide emitters. And that's because of inversion cultivation, ploughing, right? When we plough, then we release carbon dioxide in massive amounts into the atmosphere. One of the main reasons for ploughing is to prevent weed spread. It doesn't kill it, but it prevents it. And if we want to go on to non-inversion cultivation, we've got to kill the weeds, and we've got to kill it without ploughing it. And that's where glyphosate is indispensable. We've got to think the big picture. And I put that in, which isn't really relevant to what we're talking about today. It's on the world scale. but we've got to think about reducing the demonisation of this chemical. It is not. It has suffered from spurious social media posts, stupid headlines from the Daily Mail, and it's a safe chemical. And I've worked with it for over 35 years, and I can tell you there is nothing wrong with glyphosate.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any more questions? In debate now, Councillor Dobbs. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Chapman. I just add a couple of facts. I believe Bayer, who bought out Monsanto, have taken a $2 billion hit in settling claims for glyphosate. And second comes rather closer to home. In Church Street, Ashbourne, there are 3 hollyhock plants, which doubtless would not have flowered as beautifully as they have if they'd been spraying glyphosate along the pavement edges. So take the point that a weed is just a flower in the wrong place, and sometimes it can look pretty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dobbs. Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I really welcome the expertise of Councillor Chapman. I've always respected his view. It's always been sensible. It's always been well thought through. But this, I'm afraid, is just a view, and we can get buried in facts and figures. But there are other issues involved, which I think we have to take on board. And if you like to think way back in the Industrial Revolution, they were talking about lead miners, and there was no issue with mining lead. We were told in the coal industry that there was no issue with health in the coal industry, and latterly in the asbestos, there is nothing wrong with working with asbestos. They've all proved wrong, and I don't know where the science is or where it's coming from, and I don't profess to know about I'll say it right this time, glyphosate in the future. But I don't want to get to that stage. I want to make sure that we're doing things the right way, and we are looking at the green issues as well. So safety, green issues and everything, I think we're on the right track, and I fully support the work that Councillor Wayne and Councillor O'Brien have done on this issue. And I too would like to thank everybody that's taken part in this review.
Thank you. Any other speakers, please? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the various contributions to the debate, which I think were helpful, although it wasn't the intention in my moving these recommendations to actually reopen the debate on whether glyphosate is safe or not. All I'd say is that there are 27 countries in the European Union which have banned it. I happen to agree with those 27. There are also prominent members of the community in this country who deny that we have a climate emergency. What I would say is when we made the decision back in October 2020 not to use glyphosate, this was welcomed overwhelmingly by the vast majority of residents, certainly in the northern part of the district, and I've heard from colleagues welcomed elsewhere. So I'm, as I said, I respect the contributions made by other colleagues. I have great satisfaction, as I said earlier, in moving this recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your right to reply. We'll now move to the vote. It's been moved and seconded, and basically we're voting on the updated recommendations 1 to 5 that were all on your desk. Does anybody want to second that, please? Councillor Lees, thank you. So what we'll do then is we'll go on proposal 1, which is that supplementary revenue budget of £41,000 is approved for 324. You've all seen and read that, I would hope. So we'll move to the vote. So all those in favour of accepting that, please. All those against? And all those abstentions? That's moved. That one is moved as unanimous. Number 2, please, that the council confirms its policy of not utilising glyphosate in its weed control and vegetation management activities other than in respect of the control of invasive species. All those in favour of that one, please. All those against, please. And abstentions, please. There's one abstention. Yeah. The third one is that the proposed service standards and frequencies set out in Appendix C are introduced and outlined in the proposed timetable. All those in favour, please. All those against? Abstentions, please. That was carried unanimously for that one. Number 4, that officers discuss the feasibility of using alternative weed control methods on land included on the highways contract in the Derbyshire Dales with Derbyshire County Council with the objective of eliminating the use of products and materials containing glyphosate and provide an update to the members. All those in favour, please. All those against? And abstentions, please. That motion is carried. And finally, 5, that the project group, along with members subgroup, remain in place for the first year of implementation to monitor performance and consider options for future benchmarking. All those in favour, please. All those, anybody against? Any abstentions? That is also carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 10, which is the amendments to the Constitution. This report detailed a series of proposals to amend the Constitution of the Council to ensure that it is relevant and up to date, as well as compliant with the law. Those proposals within the report have been developed to improve governance, processes and procedures. The Council is also asked to adopt the Local Government Association's model for Code of Conduct for members on the recommendation of the Constitution Working Party. And I'll now ask James McLaughlin to present this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And before I start, I'd just like to thank Councillor Flitter for his kind remarks. I'm glad there's been a long debate on that because I was a bit choked when I heard that. So I've now recovered sufficiently to bore you for quite a while on the Constitution. Given that there are a number of new members in the room, I should really do the talk on the Constitution again. So it's the cornerstone of the Council, and every member and officer in this room is subject to its provisions, and we act subject to its provisions. Following the Council elections in May, it is important the document be reviewed to take account of changes in the political composition and dynamic. It's also important the document is reviewed by those officers with a statutory duty to ensure that it remains accurate and enables the Council's functions to be discharged efficiently and effectively. So this report is submitted to ensure that these requirements are met. It also brings forward recommendations from other bodies of the Council to make changes to the governance framework in respect of contract standing orders, the Code of Conduct for elected members, and terms of reference for new subcommittees that have been established. I appreciate there's been a lot of reading for members, and apologies for the 175 pages that you've now had to trawl through since the agenda was published, but I will go through each recommendation in a bit of detail just to bring clarity, hopefully, on what changes are sought. So the first recommendation is relatively straightforward, as the size of the Council has already changed to 34 members. This was the outcome of the boundary review, and it was approved by Parliament last year. So whilst we need to make the change to the Constitution, we don't really have much of a choice on that one, I'm afraid, so relatively straightforward start. The next recommendation is to remove reference to customer service standards and opening hours from Article 3 of the Constitution. As the report says, this is not something you'd normally find in a Constitution for a council. The next report on the agenda seeks to establish a new customer charter, and the opening hours are an operational matter, so it wouldn't be something that you would set out in this document. So it's recommended that these references are deleted. It doesn't change the opening hours or service standards that are referenced later on the agenda. And elsewhere on in the report, you'll see that I've recommended that public participation, citizen engagement, involvement are reviewed by the Constitution Working Group. I think that's a key area of work actually in the coming months for that particular group. At the annual meeting, Council resolved to establish two new subcommittees, and this report seeks approval to incorporate the terms of reference for those within Part 3 of the Constitution. Those are the only changes within Part 3 that are not highlighted in red. Everything else is highlighted in red as an additional. There's a strike through otherwise. So if you've taken the time to read through that, you'll have seen, hopefully, where those are. I hope that people who had paper copies got colour paper copies, otherwise it might have been slightly more difficult to identify. Part 3 also identifies a number of additions and deletions covering urgency procedures for discharging the functions of the Council. There are already existing provisions in respect of policy committees. We have used those provisions previously in respect of Council, but the proposals that have been put forward clarify that position in relation to Council. Turning then to the recommendations associated with Part 4 of the Constitution, your rules of procedure. I'm not going to repeat everything that's set out in the report, but I can confirm that all the changes proposed are highlighted in red or have been struck through. The key changes to draw to your attention are the insertion of rules for the election of the leader and deputy leaders, the principles of which were agreed by the Council last year, the insertion of a new principle for the approval of referred items from committees to Council through the minutes of committees to be reported here and be agreed here, criteria for the scope of questions received from members of the public, from members and in respect of motions on notice. That's quite detailed, and the intention there isn't to inhibit debate, it's actually to put some rules in place where they don't currently exist. You will find that in the constitutions of other authorities. They don't, in my view, they wouldn't introduce any kind of blockage or prevent you raising or discussing issues of concern. And whilst I won't be here, the role of future officers in this chair will be to enable members and the public to have those discussions and debate and scrutiny rather than inhibiting it. So those are not there to prevent, they're there to just have rules in place to better manage the way in which we handle those parts of the rules. Further changes include inserting provisions for points of order and personal explanations in order to provide some clarification during debates. At the moment, I think there's been a habit of using points of order, and those of you who sat through my training during the induction process will remember that a point of order is only about a breach of the rules or the law. It doesn't cover where you want to make a point of clarification. So taking on board that that's something that probably will continue, rather than having breaches of the rules around points of order, we'll have those points of clarification and personal explanations. And I'll look forward to watching it from afar when you use those rules in future. Inserting the Council's acceptance of people attending to report, film or broadcast from its meetings. So this was a requirement under the Openness of Local Government Bodies regulations in 2014. The Council's complied with that, but we didn't put anything in the Constitution about it. So that's suggested for insertion here as well. It will provide constitutional clarity to anybody who wishes to attend. And there isn't carte blanche to turn up and do what they want. They would have to comply with the rules of the meeting, as indeed people do. But given that we have our own broadcast taking place, we very rarely have anybody turning up to do that. Indeed, we don't have journalists turning up to meetings very often here now because we do it for them. In January of this year, Council received and accepted the recommendations of the Independent Remuneration Panel. The new Members' Allowances Scheme came into effect after the elections on the 4th of May, but it is necessary for you to approve the wording of the new scheme, which reflects the recommendations of the IRP. So that has been drafted and included in the paper for you tonight. Last year, the Constitution Working Group, with its previous membership, which contains a number of members of the current council, considered the Local Government Association's Model Code of Conduct, which had been developed to help authorities adopt a standardised approach to defining the obligations on elected members when you discharge your duties. The Constitution Working Group at that time recognised that the Model Code was clearer than the one that we presently have in the district, and it was a clearer and easier to understand document from the perspective of members and the public, and so they recommended that you adopt that code. The draft codes are appended to the report and it's recommended for adoption. If you do choose to adopt this, then I will consult with town and parish councils within the district to encourage them to adopt the same code, so that a single code will hopefully be in operation across all tiers of local government in the district. Constitution is a bit like painting the Forth Bridge. You think you've got it sorted and then you have to start again. And you'll see in the report that I've recommended that the Constitution Working Group turns its attention to 3 specific areas that we've actually previously highlighted that were in need of review. So one of those is the petition scheme, public participation is another, and area community forum. So you can see there's a bit of a theme there around engagement, involvement that needs to be addressed. And I think those parts of the Constitution do require some modernisation and better definition in terms of the operation of the area forum, certainly. Finally, the report formally presents a recommendation to amend contract standing orders, which was agreed by Community Environment Committee a fortnight ago in respect of exceptional waivers to standing orders in specific circumstances. So that was to enable third parties that were having to follow our contract standing orders to act with pace and not be held up with the bureaucracy that we have to comply with through statutory regulation. So this is the final set of amendments I'm recommending to you before a new person will be sat in this chair. But in making the recommendations to you, I can confirm that I'm satisfied that the Constitution, as printed or subject to your approval this evening, will allow for effective and efficient decision making in discharging your functions as a council. And on that, Chair, I think I'll end and open to questions.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Hobson, you've got a question. Anybody else?
Thank you, Chair. I know, James, that the monitor officer will reject a question if it's substantially the same as a question which has been put at a meeting of the council in the past 6 months. And I just can't believe that this would come forward when Councillor Dobbs, before he became a councillor, came to this council quite often to speak and to ask questions. And I think, do you really think that one person should have that, the decision whether to accept a question?
Through you, Chair. That's quite a standard provision in other authorities' constitutions. And as I say, it's not about inhibiting people and preventing them from asking that question. Like I've done with political groups around this chamber in the last 3 years, I would talk to the member of the public or the member to help them reword the question in a way that it wasn't substantially the same question that was being put. There's a bit of a role for us to actually support members and members of the public in seeking to ask questions and enabling that scrutiny. So whilst I think that rule would be appropriate, there is a burden on the post holder here and others to actually enable them to get that question in.
Thank you for your answer, James, but I'm afraid I do not agree with that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson. Does anybody else have any questions that they want to ask of Mr. McLaughlin? Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Sue Hobson for that point. I think it's a very good one, and I'm concerned that while we might have full trust in Mr. McLaughlin, we may not always have the same level of trust in the future monitoring officer, and I therefore would ask that we find another form of words to allow perhaps the filtering of questions, but without actually putting it onto one individual. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if that's a general issue for the rest of the membership, and I think it probably does link to public participation, because that's probably the area that members are coming from in terms of their concern around that delegated authority. So from my perspective, it wouldn't be an issue if that was referred to the Constitution Working Group for more work as part of that broader conversation about public participation.
Councillor Bond, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I think Mr. McLaughlin has probably answered the question really. But again, we may have had an example this evening of two questions, which weren't really two questions, but statements made by members of the public, which were valuable, but in the same way may have been a continuation of the first person's statement. And that might give us some indication of the way things could go, or indeed it would probably be important if to weed out, shall we say weed out, because we've been talking about weeds this evening, where we might get a number of questions which are exactly the same. But clearly there might be some questions, mightn't there, where a question, albeit might sound the same, but it might bring a new perspective on the issue. And again, I wonder, in terms of protecting the principle of freedom of speech, can there be some further clarity of the role of the monitoring officer in this? And that's no disrespect to yourself. It might be, as a colleague have said across the way there, that there needs to be some trust gained in a future incumbent. but maybe also some oversight in reviewing whatever form of words we might come up with, so that that particular area might be reviewed more readily than the rest of the policy.
I think that's a valid point that Councillor Bond makes, and one of the things that you may want to, when Constitution Working Group looks at public participation, is require the monitoring officer to give a report on anything that's been rejected, so that you can review that and understand what the impact has been of any change down the line. I think that would be a sensible thing to do.
Councillor Shelley.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate, yes, I have concerns about the references in section 2.8 and 2.9, which indicates that the monitoring officer would have the power to reject a question or indeed a motion from a member of the council, by the looks of it, if it was about a matter for which the local authority not a matter for which local authority has a responsibility or which affects the district. And I could see that could be open to very, very wide interpretation. So I would also hope that that could be referred back for further clarification, notwithstanding the fantastic work that the rest of the document does in terms of tidying up the Constitution. Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yeah, I'm reading the mood in the room, which is something that officers should be doing, and perhaps I will actually recommend to you an amendment to the recommendation on the rules of procedure that the references to restrictions on public questions, member questions and motions be withdrawn, subject to review by the Constitution Working Party.
Councillor Dobbs.
I was just going to say that I took some comfort, and thank you, James, for your answers to my questions that I emailed in, from the fact that this actually is very specific. It talks about questions. I hope when I spoke, I did vary the questions. They were not substantially the same, even if it was from the same area. And maybe my opinion, my statement that I made was possibly the same, but my questions were different. And equally, the motion would not be word for word the same as it was before. And that was the point that came back. And I still would have put forward this with it as written, but if councillors are happier for that to go to the Constitution Working Group for rewording, then fine. Thank you.
Any more questions, please? Councillor Hobson, you've had your questions. You can come back in debate. Yeah. Councillor Whitehead, please.
Yes, so it's just one quick question, just really about the principles of kind of that you state, which are the Nolan principles. A lot of organisations now, especially public service organisations, actually adopt 9 principles, which include respect in terms of how we treat each other, and also public service. And as we are a public service, it would seem appropriate to include both of those within the body of the Constitution.
Yeah, and I think the code of conduct is a living document, and you can amend it as and when required. What I've taken forward is what's been lifted from the LGA's model code. So use it as a basis, as a foundation, and I think the point about respect and civility is something that's really key and something I talk quite a bit about in my time here. And I think the issue with the code of conduct is the code's probably fine. It's the processes that sit behind the code of conduct when there are breaches or alleged breaches of the code that it makes it very difficult to manage or do anything to provide satisfaction or redress of grievance to individuals. And that's the issue. I think the code in itself is probably sufficient in setting out the standards required, but people are never happy. And when I'm responding to complaints, neither side's ever happy. So it's that side that will need a bit more work. And I think if you do adopt the model code tonight, then we will have to look at the procedures that sit behind that to support the assessment of complaints. Unfortunately, that won't be my problem.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Well, we're going to need to move something here. So do we need some clarification? Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just quickly sweeping through. I think it's on page 197 of the where the questions pertaining to Rule 14 are bulleted. So is the suggestion that we remove the third bullet for the time being. Is that the amended motion? And then similarly on page 200, it would be then item C, 16.3 item C. If we just removed those for the moment, pending work of the Constitution Working Group. I need some advice here. So James, would that be what you were suggesting?
That would cover it. I'm not sure that's where other members were coming from, if I'm honest, Councillor Dobbs. So maybe if debate plays out, then we'll see what comes forward.
Okay. Well, with those two changes, I would like to propose that we accept the 8 recommendations in this tour de force of a report. And thank you, James, for that. I think this must win the prize for the longest report I've experienced to date. Not that that's a very long time, but thank you for that and your hard work in this. I think that with some tweaks, and that's what the Constitution Working Group is all about, that this will allow the Council to have the necessary framework to carry out its business effectively, and it will also ensure that the Constitution aligns with current evolved practice, which is always a good situation to be in.
Right, so you're moving that with those 2 alterations, which we're going to clarify shortly. Councillor Hughes.
Yes, Chair.
Chair, I'd be happy to second that, but I would like to include another point, that is point A in 16.3 on page 200, is not about a matter for which the local authority has a responsibility or which affects the district. The scrutiny committee can investigate the police and the county council and various other bodies. Therefore, it seems that we should be able to have motions reflecting those bodies as well as our own body. Therefore, I think this one should be struck from the Constitution and shouldn't be discussed any further. And the same will then forego for the first point on page 197, because members of the public may very well ask the similar questions about or make similar comments about the output from the scrutiny committee. So I think those two just need to be struck, because we should be able to talk about and have motions or I don't know, note or receive or approve motions, recommendations from the scrutiny committee. Peter, would that be acceptable to you?
Probably, Councillor Hughes. If you could just clarify, we're on page
197, the first bullet.
Yes, sorry, I found it.
And page 200, paragraph A.
So we're therefore deleting from what we've got on page 197, first bullet and third bullet. Yeah.
Yes, but the third one would come to the Constitution Committee. Whereas
yes, but for the moment, we'll remove them. And then on page 200, to remove A and C.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
Right, so in a roundabout fashion, it's been moved and it's been seconded, and I'm going to get it clarified so all members, are totally aware of what they're voting for in a short time. But we are in debate. It's been moved and it's been seconded. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, James. I'm not trying to be awkward. I did read this report in great detail, obviously. I've got another concern about the delegated powers to officers. There's an awful lot of delegation. My view is that we are the elected members and we should be voting on things. There's lots of things that we should not be delegating. And urgent decisions, the provision for urgent decisions, I just feel quite uncomfortable about some of the scope of those. My other point, and I have previously raised this with the leader of the council, Councillor Flitter, we've obviously got the setup of these 2 new subcommittees, but the Gypsy and Traveller Working Group is just 4 members without a chair. And I appreciate what you said earlier on about waiting for any recommendations from that group. But I feel that just 4 people, and we seem to be at the point now where we're just back at the beginning of looking at recommendations that were dismissed in July 2021. So as regards subcommittees, I would be happy for that to be a politically proportionate subcommittee and to be act as any other subcommittee. It was seen as this is a very important issue in the Derbyshire Dales, which has it's gone on for far too long, and I want to move forwards with that and not move back. So that's another point I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick contribution. In my day job, I spend maybe more time than I'd like to banging on 16 and 17-year-olds about the US and UK constitutions in my day job, trying to teach A-level politics. So it's normally me being accused of rattling on for hours and about constitutions, which most people in the room I'm in don't have a huge amount of interest in, although some do. So I'd like to thank James really for this report, which has massively trumped me in terms of banging on about the Constitution, but in an incredibly professional way, which shows a real passion and interest, which just reflects everything about that he's brought to the job, and it's a fantastic report. So thank you for that. And believe it or not, about 2 or 3 of my Year 12s have now started watching recordings of these meetings. So not all of them, I suspect, and probably just to try and catch me out and see if I say something stupid. But if he's ever in the Little Over area and he wants to pop in and talk to 16 and 17-year-olds about the importance of constitutions, he's always welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Archer. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report. I have to admit that over the past 4 years, I've been one of those who's both complained about the Constitution and also used it to my own ends, as James will acknowledge, and probably some of the members on the other side of the room will as well. But the point I wanted to make is about the reference to the area community forums and how important they should be to the work of this council. But the trend I've noticed over the past 4 years to those to have been relegated to something of an afterthought. I'm not sure whether they're even in the calendar for meetings this year. But I have to say, if you organise a meeting in the middle of February at 7:30 in Bakewell, it's not surprising that you only get a handful of people turning up. So I do think I do hope that when the Constitution Working Party considers area community forums, they do so in a positive way, and they really look to ways that they can make them more attractive to residents from across the district. There is a view that we're very Matlock centric. That's shared by members and it's shared by residents in other parts of the district. I mean, that may be uncomfortable to hear, but that's a view that is shared outside of our main towns, and we need to dispel that. And the area community forums are one way of doing that. Nor are they there for residents, I think, to listen to council members or council officers drone on for half an hour about how wonderful we are, and then allow 5 minutes for speaking. They're there for us to hear the views of residents. I think we need to rebalance them. So the main point I'm making is to urge those of you who are members of the Constitution Working Group to really look positively at how we can enhance the role of the working groups, and I plead to our officers to please arrange the meetings at times of the day and months of the year when they're attractive for residents to get there and attend in their numbers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Franks. Thank you.
I think I'd like to reply really to Councillor Hobson. And I'd also be interested to hear, there were 4 of us on the group and 2 officers, and I think from my point of view, I would go along with Steve Flitter's point about the Gypsy and Traveller group. I think at the moment, yes, 2 of us are new councillors and have been playing a bit of catch up with the past, but I think we need to be a small group to move forward. And I really disagree with what Councillor Hobson said, and I'd be interested to hear the views of the other members at some point. It isn't particularly relevant, I don't think, to this discussion that we should be having just now, but I think it's something we could discuss outside this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, thank you. Well, those words virtually what I was considering saying. I know that the group that Councillor Hobson was in charge of on the last in the last term of this authority, and I respected the way that it was handled, in the fact that everybody had room to say what they believed, and it was done fairly, and no political inference was made from Councillor Hobson. But having a large committee, politically proportionate, meant that there was a lot of councillors there, sure, not too many sites, and somebody always had a reason why the Gypsy Traveller encampment shouldn't go there. And it did come very political, you could see that. And I also respect Councillor Lees, because at least in Ashbourne, he came up with 2 sites that obviously they didn't prove possible, but they were recommendations put forward. Many others did not see it that way and didn't take an active role. It was just a phrase that we're not having them here. And that is what I personally tried to get away from. When you talk about politically proportionate, we are politically proportionate because we've got 1 member from every group. And that's an even proportion, not a 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever, but it is a scheme where we are 1 person from each group. And this isn't going to happen overnight. And that's what some people think is going to happen. But we've been looking for nearly 30, 40 years at this problem in this area, and nobody has come up with any land that is suitable, not for the people who want to live there or the residents. And at some stage, we have to find a solution. But I'm pretty darn sure that our 4 members have views from their own parties on where they want to be. We shall discuss all areas, and then I hope the group of those 4 individuals that all have experience, they will come back and make some recommendations to us. Then we can start to look at where we go from there. But don't let's play politics with this. Let's forget what's happened in the past. Clean slate, start again and work together.
Thank you. Any other speakers before I just, Councillor Hughes?
Thank you, Chair. I think Sue Hobson made some very interesting points, and it's nice to see members of her group making strong statements about issues that they believe in. And I would ask if she has any concerns about the officer delegation, that perhaps that could be discussed at the Constitution Committee. She could bring some proposals forward in the Constitution Committee for discussion. Would that be, through you, Chair, would that be acceptable?
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes, for your comments. I think from my point of view, it's looking at democracy, listening to people, not politics, listening to our people and the elected members making those decisions, and that does concern me. Thank you.
Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at page 237 onwards, and it's already been referred to regarding codes of conduct for members. And I noted that this authority does not have a standards committee. And again, the decision-making process around complaints and so on may, and again, no disrespect to the current monitoring officer at all in this respect. But again, a standards committee does indeed, provide a wider accountability for the authority and possibly a greater transparency. I'm not saying that should be included now, and I'm not wanting to make that part of the debate, but wonder whether that will be part of the conversation through the committee going forward.
Yes, thank you.
Is that all right? I'm sorry, it's an aside, really.
It is, but I'm going to ask Mr. McLaughlin too. It is an important point. Thank you for raising it, but Mr. McLaughlin will come back to you on that.
So the process as it currently stands is that complaints about member conduct, be it here at the district council or at town or parish level, come to me. I assess those complaints, and my assessment is then considered by an independent person who then gives me feedback as to whether they think that that process has been followed correctly and the assessment is correct. If it's considered that there is a potential breach of the code, and if there is, there's usually a need for an investigation to establish that. If there is a need for that, then we have an established hearing panel under the Governance and Resources Committee. Fortunately, this was one of the first things I had to deal with when I came here. We didn't have a hearing panel procedure because Derbyshire Dales had never had anything go to a hearing panel. And we haven't since from that first time that we've had to do it. However, members of the Scrutiny Committee will be getting a report at its meeting on the 10th of August, setting out the complaints that have been received in respect of member conduct in the 2022-23 year. And happily, as a sneak preview, there were far fewer in the last 12 months than there were in the preceding 12 months. So things have improved on that front, and I hope that continues, certainly for the next post holder in this job.
Thank you. Before I go back to Councillor Dobbs, I thought I got a hand up there. Councillor Edwards Walker, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to propose that we have a deferment based on the fact that there's so many issues being raised, and it's such a vast project, really. With a few constitutions to change, and fair enough, but there's so many clauses that some are historical and obviously straightforward, but there are quite a few that need further discussion. I just wondered whether it's possible to have a deferment to allow more time for a working group or a wider working group to discuss each clause, please.
Well, are you making that as an amendment, or do you want to hear what the actual the actual motion was, and then we'll come back to you, or do you want it to be an amendment?
No, we'll hear the motion first, then, please. Okay. Thank you.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to ask. Is that all right with you? I'm going to ask James just to clarify what we are going to be voting on. I'll come back and see if that is okay with you, and if it is, we'll go to a vote. Okay. If nobody else wants to speak, thank you.
Okay. So in terms of what's been proposed, everything is as printed, as I understand it, other than recommendation 4, which, if I've understood the proposed amendment or the change to that recommendation, it would be that subject to the removal of the first bullet point of draft Council Procedural 14.4 and Rule 16.3a, and the referral of the third bullet point of the draft Council Procedural 14.4 and Rule 16.3c to the Constitution Working Group. Part 4 of the Constitution Rules of Procedure be amended on the basis of the insertions and deletions highlighted in Appendix 2 of this report.
All right, thank you very much for that. But with regard to the motion, there are 175 pages to sort of digest, and I just wondered if it could be possible to have a deferment, please.
Yeah. Okay. I'm advised that you.
So the proposal on the table is to approve. An amendment to defer negates that proposal, so it's not a valid amendment. So what would have to happen for that to happen is for the recommendations to be voted down and for a new proposal to defer. You couldn't, you can't, it would negate the proposal that's before you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Chair,
Councillor
I think it wasn't only a referral of the third point; it was also the deletion and then referral of the third
Yes,
point.
subject to the removal of the first bullet point of Draft Council Procedural 14.4 and Rule 16.3A,
Okay.
and the referral of the third bullet point.
Well, the delete and referral of
Yes,
the
I'll
third
put deletion rather than removal. Yeah.
Right, Councillor Dobbs, we'll come back to you now. As
Can I just ask, because I understand the reason for possible deferment, because it is a long report, but within these papers, a lot of this relates to the council and the new setup, with the number of councillors, the committees and everything, which if we defer the whole lot, I think will we won't be able to operate as we should do. Am I correct in thinking that way?
Yes, there are a number of recommendations there through you, Chair, that you need to determine tonight, in my view. I hear what members have said in terms of the scheme of delegation. I would highlight that in terms of the scheme of delegation, there's only 2 additional things that have been inserted in red, which actually you've agreed previously. I've just highlighted that they're new additions, so there aren't any new additional powers going to officers. And the suggested wording in terms of urgency for council, that's something that could go to Constitution Working Group for review. I don't think that's an issue, because that would only be effective in the event of a COVID type situation. If government doesn't approve virtual meetings, then we'll be back to officers having to discharge those functions. So unless there's a pandemic around the corner, it probably won't be effective anytime soon.
thank you, Councillor Dobbs. You wish to come back as mover, you're right to reply.
Just briefly, I would urge to not defer. I think the Constitutional Working Group does have the capacity to tweak this. This is an organic document. It isn't set in stone, and I hope with that in mind we can address these issues of standards and delegation, may indeed develop more interest in the Constitution Working Group than has hitherto been known. So I would move as suggested with those changes.
Thank you, Councillor Dobbs. Well, I think we're nearly there. So obviously we're going to go to the vote now in in the amendment that the deletion, etc., that James McLaughlin's mentioned. So it's the motion from Councillor Dobbs, seconded by Councillor Hughes, and all those in favour of accepting that, please. Against? And abstentions? So that's carried unanimously after all that. But, thank you very much. We're going to move on to another one of Mr. McLaughlin's reports now. The Customer Access Strategy at Agenda Item 10. This is the report that proposes the adoption of approval of a customer access strategy which will codify for the way in which the District Council will offer a high quality customer experience to residents, businesses and visitors to the Derbyshire Dales. Mr. McLaughlin, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to report this to you tonight because this document's been in the pipeline for quite some time. It's probably been 12 months in the making. The strategy itself, as those of you who have read the report and the strategy will see, it details the objectives that will provide a focus on putting our customers at the heart of what we do, reducing digital exclusion, harnessing opportunities of digital technology. But essentially what it does is giving a commitment to the council to being responsive to the needs of customers and being seen and recognised as such. So in this sense, it's nothing radical. It's what you and customers would expect. The guiding principles underpinning the strategy are channel shift. And that's our aim is to be digital first as customers increasingly want online interaction with the council, and it reduces service delivery costs through efficiency savings. Now, channel shift is effectively moving from in-person visits to the town hall, or people writing letters to the town hall. People are increasingly wanting to use smartphones or call or other methods where they don't even have to speak to anybody at all. Apps even are becoming increasingly popular for local authorities, and that's what channel shift is about, moving to those easier ways of interacting with the organisation for the majority of people. Again, in terms of the principles, listening and responding to citizens and customers so that we deliver excellent services. So that's actually taking account of the feedback that we get, be that negative or positive. There's always room for improvement, and this organisation should look to learn from the feedback that we receive. And no one left behind, ensuring that everyone can access the services and information that they need, recognising that not everyone will be able to access digital services. And that point's in there because I remember when I was interviewed for this job, the now leader of the council actually asked me a question about that in the interview. And at the time, I think I waffled on a bit, but actually, this is essentially what I should have said. So I've got there eventually. The strategy recognises the significant progress that we've made as an authority since 2019 in providing digital opportunities for residents, businesses and visitors to apply, pay and interact with the council through the website, through our CRM or customer relationship management system. If we hadn't have had that system during the pandemic, I'm not sure how this organisation would have actually coped, not only in terms of its interactions with citizens and customers, but also in terms of making payments, various grant payments. You'll recall that Steve and Karen and Giles were all involved in terms of getting payments to businesses and individuals. Without that, we really would have struggled as an organisation. So we have made some significant progress through the use of that software. I'd also like to thank colleagues in customer service and business support. Actually, this will probably be the last time I get to do that properly in this environment. But they are the people that you see when you come into this building. They're always excellent, polite, courteous, all the things that you'd expect. And also on the phone, they've had to deal with a number of difficult issues in the time that I've been here, not least the pandemic, but waste issues and issues that we've had in relation to other high-profile areas of complaint. So I think that I'd like members to actually recognise, and I'm sure you do, the contribution that those colleagues make. But from the perspective of customers, this strategy sets out our new customer charter, which is perhaps the key part of this document, which provides service standards for the way in which we will interact and respond to customers. It's been shared with staff during our recent core briefings. It's been well received on the whole. That's the key part of the document from my perspective. The actual strategy itself is a bit of a forward-looking document setting out where we want to go, sort of a vision document. But actually, it's that customer charter that's the real cornerstone of where we want to be, and it kind of builds on the broader expectations that members have around transparency, openness, clarity of expectation. So I think members, you've probably had the chance to read the document. I will leave it there. However, I will put my hand up, and I've been saying to Tommy Shaw in the last few weeks that I haven't had an original thought in my 20 years in local government. And the proof of that's in the section on equalities, where it refers to Southwark. So I'm putting my hand up and apologising for that error. Sometimes you get caught out, don't you? But I was in a hurry to try and get that report ready for this meeting, so that's the reason that's in there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James. So basically, any questions? Councillor Murphy?
Thank you, Chair. James, have we got statistics of the number of individuals in Derbyshire Dales who don't have access to the internet and whatever? Somebody shared with me the other day an interesting fact that 18% of 65 plus don't have access to email, and I was a bit staggered, but I know another organisation that were very keen to sort of force everybody onto the website and whatever, and we were able to say, please, don't do away totally with the access to telephones. I'm sure we're not, but that's for the over 65. So there must be, in other age categories, there must be quite a few people who don't have access. So
I haven't got the data to hand, but I can get it for you. The census data tells us that the population of Derbyshire Dales is getting older, and whilst older people are generally better connected than perhaps have been in previous times, there still is a gap there. And one of the things I think this council might want to do is talk to the county council and other public service partners, including town and parish councils, about how we can reduce that digital exclusion by having greater presence in localities, or using those town and parish councils as a signposting service to the services we offer, or broader public services. So I think that's an area for development.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you, Chair. In response to Councillor Murphy's question, can I ask another question about telephone access to the council? And we're working in an environment now where people are working from home some of the time, and they did so quite extensively during COVID. And can Mr. McLaughlin very kindly showed me how the telephone system works now, the new telephone system works to enable access from home. So perhaps he could explain to the council the way in which the new council telephone system allows access from home.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes. So a key part of this strategy and a key message the Chief Executive has been relaying is about responsiveness. And clearly during the pandemic there were concerns about how responsive we were as an organisation from you as members, and also, to be fair, senior officers also were asking questions regularly about how responsive we were. Now during the pandemic we shifted away from hard landlines in this building, and we now have a telephone system on our laptops. So when you ring us, you're actually talking to us through the computer, and I think that's probably fairly commonplace. Those of you who've seen the inside of contact centres, that's been standard for many, many years. But this is becoming standard in office environments, in public services and private sector and everywhere else. So when you call us, you're actually calling us on the laptop. And within there, we're able to, I've got all your telephone numbers listed in there, so I know who's ringing me. If I don't pick up, I'm not deliberately ignoring you, it's because I'm busy. And that's why you'll go to voicemail, or it'll go through to Deborah Heaton or Jess in corporate support. But that's been very helpful in terms of helping people working from home to be contactable. So if you are trying to get hold of an officer, there should never be a situation where somebody says, oh, they're working from home, you can't get hold of them, because if they're working on this machine, then they will have access to the Horizon software. So Councillor Hughes had the benefit of seeing it yesterday, but if any member wants to come and have a look at what we use, and it may well be in future with the rollout of Microsoft Teams and how that gets integrated, that we may even be able to create individual personal numbers for you as councillors within the system. That's certainly what other authorities are doing. So again, there's plenty of development in the pipeline on that front.
Thank you. Councillor Shelley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd certainly endorse the necessity to ensure that there's always a human face to the council and whatever we do. You can't get away from talking to real people, despite what ChatGPT, etc., may have in store for us. Just one query on the strategy itself, as it's put forward. There's reference on page 257 to achieving WCAG accessibility status for our website, and I think I understand what that is, having looked it up. But I just wonder whether this is the place in the document to also commit the council to endorsing the Plain English campaign's crystal mark for it's not necessarily for this document, which I understand is probably not going out to the public, but for those things that do.
I think that's a valid point, and I would expect to see that in the communications marketing strategy, which I expect will be reviewed in due course. So, yeah, you're right. Probably not the right place in this document, but certainly there.
Councillor Nash.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, James, for the reports. Just want a couple of questions on measuring our performance. Are you going to measure the number of calls that are abandoned? And shouldn't that be a key statistic?
Yeah, we do. One of the indicators is to actually capture that, and with this new software, we're able to get very definitive performance data.
Great. And the second half, lots of people now tack on a customer satisfaction survey at the end of web interactions or calls. Has the council given any thought to that?
Not yet, but now you've mentioned it, we'll add it to the to-do list for the next post holder.
Thanks.
Councillor Ripton.
Thank you. Yeah, just to build on Councillor Nash's point, the metrics here are good, but they're very quantitative, and I think how people feel about the service is important, so don't lose sight of that. And then, as someone who spent most of his life working on software and these kinds of issues, I'm fully on board with digitisation as a strategy. But I think the thing I've learned is the more you digitise, effectively, you imagine the bell curve, the people at either end are the people who have the deeper needs. So again, the measures are good for people who do contact, but I think you need to look harder then for the people who don't find it possible to contact. So there needs to be a way to just reflect that, I think.
Councillor Linthwaite.
Thank you, Chair. Just thinking about Councillor Murphy's point and also following on from Simon, sorry, I've forgotten your surname. Access for people who find difficulty getting online, filling in forms. Would it be possible to have just some support on the reception desk? You know, that somebody there, that if someone needs to fill in a form and they haven't got access to the systems that they need to, that they can pop into the reception and that somebody will help them fill the forms in online here.
Yeah, absolutely. They do that already.
Right,
and if people ring up, then effectively the staff will go through the form and input it for them and do it through their machine so that people don't have to log on. So
super, thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And again, going back to the very valid point which Councillor Murphy raises, which I think we all recognise when we talk to our residents. There's reference, of course, in the strategy to continuous improvement and the use of surveys. Can we have an assurance that those surveys themselves will take account of the fact that there are a significant proportion of people who are not necessarily IT competent or literate? But I have noticed a tendency that all our services are tending to be digital surveys. So I think we may be reinforcing a belief that may not necessarily be true. So can we be assured that those surveys themselves will reflect the fact that there are 15–20% of people who don't communicate in that way?
I think that's a really valid point. And I think one of the things we could do is actually ask people who present at reception, or if they're willing to undertake a survey with us over the phone at the end of a transaction. So I'll take that away, Councillor O'Brien. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? I'd just like to say that those questions were really good, and I'm sure Mr. McLaughlin will enjoy passing those on to his predecessor. Or successor, I mean. Sorry, Councillor Bond.
Just one, Chair, thank you. And this is a great report, actually, giving a great indication of the way forward and of the way in which we value everyone within the authority. I wondered whether, I was just thinking about Specsavers and the fact that the recent advert suggests that I don't go to Specsavers, they come to me. And again, there is a little bit of a turnaround in this kind of promotional side of life where there is an advocacy or a getting out to people. I'm not saying that is a service we could subscribe to wholeheartedly, but I wondered whether there is an option going forward of just looking into that and what that kind of advocacy or home visitation might look like in certain circumstances.
Karen, do you want to say something on that, please?
Yes, they already do that in revenues and benefits, particularly benefits, where people might want to apply but can't fill in the online form.
And James would like to add something as well, please.
Yeah, I think one of the things that in future you'll get a report on a transformation strategy and transformation programme. One of the things that may come through that is trying to understand the data that we get excuse me, from customers and actually using that to better target our time and services to respond to people that have greater need that we perhaps miss because they're harder to reach. So that will be something that comes forward, I'm sure, in future.
Any more questions? If not, would anybody like to move? Councillor Hughes?
Yes, Chair, I'd be very pleased to move this. I think it's important that we continue to reach the residents in the ways that they expect us to reach them, or for them to be able to reach us in the way they expect us to reach. They expect to reach us, and that really means a variety of different mechanisms. Probably post is less important now, but face-to-face, telephone, and increasingly web forms and email seem to be the way things are going. There is a real benefit to the council in self-service through digital self-service, because it means that there's a much lower administrative load on the service. The data is captured in a form that can readily be used and readily be put into reports and so on. And you can see this in a variety of different ways, from the county councils drain blockage system, which allows you to just click on a map and fill in a form, and it allows the county council to understand where a blockage is, or ours, in fact, in terms of waste management and in terms of emptying waste bins on streets, which is excellent. So I have no issue. I'd very much like to commend this report to the council, and particularly the last section on the charter, which Mr. McLaughlin said was really central to the whole of this report. And it's important that we have such charters. A lot of it is what we would expect, what we would as individuals would expect from officers if we were communicating with the council. But I do have one small addition, and that is on page 264 about what happens if a council member visits you, and it talks about arriving and doing things. And I'd just like to add, fully prepared with the necessary documents to that particular bullet, and I'd like to include that in this document. There have been cases that I know of where that hasn't happened, and we must make sure that it always happens. So with that small change, I'd very much like to commend this report to the council.
So, Councillor, just to confirm that you wanted to move it, but just with a slight amendment to the actual report.
Yes.
Yes. And does that find a seconder, please? Councillor Murphy, do you wish to speak? No. Thank you very much. Right. So it's been moved and it's been.
May I just make a quick comment?
No, we're going into debate.
Oh.
I was a bit ahead of myself then, but we are going into debate. Thank you. Yes, you can speak, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't want to be forgotten, excluded.
Wouldn't do that.
It's just a comment. Last week, actually, a resident had contacted me who, for various reasons, is not able to access services digitally. A vast array of services, whether it be BT, British Gas, all those people, but praised Derbyshire Dales for their the fact that you can always pick up the phone and speak to somebody at Derbyshire Dales. And can I just say as well, Sarah Downs MP did join me on that meeting that resident in a most positive and helpful way. She's going to speak to the appropriate minister for digital exclusion, and hopefully she will get back to me. So if there's any information, I'm sure we'll share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers, please? Councillor Boothroyd.
I just have one point for the other end of the scale a little bit. When we undertake surveys, what do we do to actually assure ourselves that we are getting a broad spectrum of responses? Because I know personally, and I think a lot of my sort of generation don't necessarily go on the district council website and fill in surveys. And I wonder, we're talking about digital exclusion for people who can't do it, but actually we may be offering the opportunity. It's not being taken, and we are then assuming that we're getting a broad spectrum of views. I know I sat with a survey on my desk about second homes for about 6 months, and I didn't do it because I was busy and had a baby and I didn't manage it. And I wondered afterwards how many respondents to that survey actually own second homes, and are we getting that breadth from survey respondents? Are we checking that?
Thank you for your statement. I think Mr. Capes, if you go and have a word with Mr. Capes at the end, he might be able to enlighten you. Thank you.
I can give a very quick answer now, Chair, if it helps. And that's in the resident survey that we've recently done, and we'll be reporting to members in the coming months. 2,000 members of the public answered, and there were strenuous efforts made to achieve representation, not just across geography, but also across age groups. And because of a underrepresentation of young people, actually we went out on the street and nobbled them to try and get more young people to reply. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers before we go back to, I forget who moved that one, Councillor Hughes. Nothing further to say, Councillor Hughes. Can we move to the vote then, please? Right, all those in favour of the recommendations? Against? Abstentions? Looks like that's carried unanimously. Would somebody, because it's 8:20, would anybody like to just move that we extend further than go half an hour from past? Councillor Burford? seconded by Councillor Archer. All those in favour? Anybody against? That's carried. Right, that's carried. I've also had another request that we have 5 minutes for a comfort break. So we'll just hold the meeting for a short time while people can stretch their legs. Thank you. Thank you. Right then, okay now. Yeah, thank you. Right, we move to agenda item 12, which is the land at Bakewell Road, Matlock, the outcome of the tender process. We're being asked to receive an update, it's just an update on the outcome of the further invitation to tender and status of the project, and to consider options to be carried forward for further assessment. So I'll just hand you over to Giles Dan, the Regeneration and Place Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wayne, and also thanks to members that were able to make the briefing we had earlier this week. We had a good turnout, and hopefully we answered most of the questions as far as we can at this stage. So hopefully that was useful. So as Councillor Wayne's mentioned, and as we discussed on Monday, tonight's report isn't asking members to make a decision. What we're asking for is members to consider the options, and then we'll bring a report back in September and make a decision at that point. So perhaps we would have a fuller debate then. So in terms of, just to recap very quickly, the purpose of the report, as Councillor Wayne says, twofold. One is to update on the outcome of the tender process. We've run 2 tenders for this scheme, as members will be aware. And secondly, to consider the 4 development options before you to be carried forward for further assessment. So on the tenders, the second exercise was completed in April after a re-tender exercise that commenced in February. As you'll see from the report, we had 2 tenders back, one at 1.474 million, the other at tender B at 2.001 million. And just a few points I just wanted to note on the tenders received. So despite the value engineering that was agreed previously by the members and the project management group, both tenders had increased in cost from the first round that was undertaken November through January 23. There was also a significant variation in the rates between the 2 tenders. Tender A had incomplete pricing information. We did go back and ask for that, but we didn't receive full information. And Tender B exceeded the revised budget for the scheme, which is set out in the report. We also identified some financial resilience risks, and on the back of that, as officers, we were not in a position to recommend to members either tender, and so unable to proceed with the tenders in front of us. So, as I stated in the report, that was a highly disappointing position. We issued a statement in May following discussion with the proposed cinema operator in terms of the position on the back of the tender process. So what we've done since is to sit down either virtually or face-to-face with the leaders of the Progressive Alliance, the ward members, and also the chair of C&E to look at a long list of options, and they're set out in the report, with a view to refining those into a shorter list of options, which are before you this evening. So you've got 4 development options, the do nothing option, which we always have in any business case, and 3 other options that we're proposing to take forward for further assessment with the support of external consultants. As I've said, we're aiming to get back to members with the outcome of that further assessment in September. We as officers are very conscious of the timescales on this programme now, and the need to bring things to members for decision. So with that, I'll pause and take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Councillor Wakeman.
Yes, I'd just like to thank Giles for the workshop. Obviously, he's cut down on all the questions because it was an excellent workshop. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lees, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as at the workshop, I'd like to see that when this goes back out to tender, that it's done in at least 2 parts. One, the public realm aspect of it, and one, the building works, because I think one's getting loaded against the other with the tender prices because of the nature of the work, basically, because people that do public realm work know what they're doing, and people that are doing the building work know what they're doing. So I think you're getting 2 cross purposes, and I think you'll get a better tender by having it split into 2 parts. So I'd like to see that added if possible at some point. Thank you.
Giles.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, yes, I think that's a good point, Councillor Lees. When we went out to tender last time, the advice from the QS was to put the whole project together to try and achieve economies of scale. But I think, given where we are, then I think looking at different procurement options for the project, which could include separating out the shell works from the public realm, is a sensible suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. During the progress of this project, we've had various assurances before we go out to tender that the cost estimates were robust. But for reasons outlined in the report, they don't appear to have been so. Can I ask, are we satisfied that the QS services were engaged how can I put this, are providing us with a service which we can rely on?
I think we can say, Councillor O'Brien, that we're as satisfied as we can be. I think in the defence of the QS, the situation within the construction market is difficult to predict at the moment. In terms of the estimates that they came up with, we did go back and test them with them in terms of allowances for inflation and contingencies and so on. And actually, as officers, we did increase both of those to try and come up with a budget estimate that was as realistic as possible when we went to tender. But I think what we've found is that we are in a very challenging market, and there is a lot of unpredictability at the moment in terms of pricing, and I think that's been borne out not just on this project but a lot of other schemes.
Thank you. Any more questions? Would anybody like to move this item? Councillor Burford. You have to put your microphone on, please.
Propose that we recommend, or we accept the recommendations 1 to 4. First of all, before I say any more, can I thank Giles Dan and Steve Capes and Mike Goldsworthy for all the work that they've done and the fact that they've engaged with ward members in Matlock for the past, I don't know how long it is, probably several years, isn't it, Giles? And that, I think that the effort they've put in and the way they portrayed the scheme through many obstacles perhaps along the way has been admirable. So I thank them for that. I also, just before I propose or say anything anymore, can I thank Councillor Stuart Lees for the point that he made. He made it at the workshop earlier in the week, and I would endorse that after many years of procuring public realm contracts myself. I can understand what he means, because I don't think I go to a builder for public realm works particularly. So that's a very good point, and I agree with what he said. But can I say, first of all, saying no to this project and withdrawing is no longer an option. Following years of procrastination before even the former leader of this council and members opposite came on board and accepted it and promoted it, I think, and in fact, I've been campaigning on this this issue for many years as a member of various groups in Matlock, and it has caused a lot of heartache, I suppose, for people in the town who've been involved in that campaign, because they've all been putting a lot of time and effort, including an architect, free time, and other people who had expertise in procuring this sort of scheme. So I think that alone is a reason to certainly give this recommendation, or the series of recommendations, another chance to go forward. A cinema, I think, is the only serious use for this dark, dank basement of a site. Even when Finefair, I think it was, the original supermarket was built in the 1980s, many of us in Matlock thought that was a bad idea, especially this creation of almost a basement market hall, which was never a success. It's been upgraded over the years once or twice, but it's never been a success. And so stall holders have dwindled over that time. I think there's only probably 1 or 2 that ever turned up on a Saturday morning or other days of the week. So that was a total disaster. So it is fortunate that the cinema proprietors are persistent and determined to carry on with this project, even if they'll have to defer construction because of both their priorities and ours as well. So I think the recommendations 1 to 4 do not commit members to supporting a specific option, but just noting refined options prior to further assessment by consultants in particular and by obviously senior officers of the council. But I think it's absolutely vital that we make progress tonight to ensure that officers can propose a final option in September, and it's fairly urgent that is, since the shared prosperity funding has to be spent by March 2025. So if we don't meet those deadlines, then we'll have to pay that money back to the government, which would be rather upsetting. And the alternative, as I say, is an embarrassing empty building or derelict building in perpetuity. And it's the entrance to the town that's so important, I think. That's why I would like to see the public realm works pursued along with the cinema, even if the food and beverage unit has to be deferred for the time being in terms of being fitted out. As Sue said when she was talking about weed growth in the town centre and self-set trees and so on, you can add to that. I mean, if you look at it now, it doesn't look too good, to be honest. And it's not just the weeds and such like and self-set trees, it's the paving. The paving along Bakewell Road after rain is absolutely appalling. Everyone's dodging the puddles. So it's a long time since that was laid. I say it was about 1985, I think, something like that. And so it's needed. It's badly in need of relaying and decent paving to continue what was done under the Impress scheme around Crown Square, courtesy partly of Sainsbury's, of course, when they came to Matlock. So can I just urge everyone to support this motion?
Thank you, Councillor Eaves. I think you were just second. Are you wishing to second?
Yeah, wishing to second there, Chair. Agree with everything that Councillor Burford had said. We probably need to look. It's nice to use local craftsmen, builders, etc. Public realms works. It's nice to use local contractors, but we probably need to look a bit further afield as well on this one now. Now we've done the local stuff, so I think we need to go a bit more in depth on this. So I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Councillor Whitehead wanted to say something, but can I just say I'd like to get all this done this evening, so I don't want to stifle any debate, but if we could make it nice and concise. Thank you. You're okay, are you? Councillor Slack, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be brief as I can, Chair, so we can get on. Yeah, I agree with all the councillors, the council leads especially, to separate public realm work from the shell of the building. I think this is important because when we come to September, beg your pardon, when we come to September, we might find prices have gone up again, and we might have to separate them anyway. So the main thing is get the cinema up, really. It's been a difficult time. I mean, Steve Capes and Giles and have gone right through this. Through COVID, they started in COVID, if you remember, and went right through there. And then now we've got the financial crisis, cost of living crisis hitting us. So, but they've stuck by this, and they've come up, I believe, with a sensible way forward. I believe 3 and 4 are probably the most areas that I would like to see finish, but we'll have to wait till September to see how when we get the prices in and see what the financial position is in September. So yeah, I support this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, just a quick one. I also want to add my thanks to Giles and the team. It must be very frustrating, but also I'd like to commend the cinema operator for sticking with us, because it's a project we do want to see developed in the town. We do want to see some public realm works done to improve the town. For somebody to be interested and keep being interested despite the delays is admirable, and I'd like to pay tribute to the guy that is going to be the operator.
Thank you. Anybody else? Right. Do you wish to say anything further, Councillor Burford, or can we move to the vote, please?
No, just 4 letters really. TINA. There is no alternative.
Thank you, Tina. So we're voting on recommendations 1 to 4. And all those in favour, please. All those against? And have we got any abstentions? So that's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 13, which is Ashbourne Reborn, the governance and delivery. This report summarises the activity and process related to Ashbourne Reborn Levelling Up Fund awarded by the government in January 2023, and it highlights key programme risks and sets out proposals for an updated governance structure. Steve Capes, Giles Dan and Laura Simpson are going to present this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wayne. I will kick us off. But before I do, I just wanted to introduce Laura Simpson on my right, who joined us in May and has taken on the role of Ashbourne Reborn Programme Manager within her role. Very pleased Laura has joined the team. She's grabbed the role with both hands already and really added to the team. So thank you for your work today, Laura. So in terms of introductions, both prior to At Risk and since the funding announcement from government back in January, officers have been working closely with the town team who developed the original concept for Ashbourne Reborn, Derbyshire County Council's officers, Ashbourne Methodist Church, Town Council and Ashcom to put in place the necessary policies and procedures to enable delivery of the programme, and we need that collaborative approach to continue. We had a very positive public meeting back in March. Some 250 people, mainly local residents and businesses, attended that down at the church in Ashbourne, and a lot of positivity in the room at that stage. In your report tonight, you will see terms of reference for an enhanced programme board, which aims to involve members directly in decision making on the programme, whilst retaining autonomy for the project boards overseeing the two projects, basically so they can get on and deliver those schemes within the governance that we've set up for the programme. It is also proposed that a Derbyshire Dales District Council member chairs that programme board, as the council is the accountable body for the programme. As is the case with all large-scale grant-funded schemes like this, time's always against us. We've got 2 years to deliver this programme. It's a significant programme for this council. And there are challenges, like Councillor Flitter said, to overcome. But the design of both projects is now progressing well. Public engagement event took place last night. There's a further one this Saturday, and the online consultation for the programme and that element is due to go live tomorrow. We're aware of some comments today that have come in through social media channels. We'll be interested to see the wider feedback through the consultation process generally. And we're in listening mode now. We'll see what people think and we'll listen to what people say. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Laura, who's just going to add a few specific points from the report, and then we'll take questions together.
Okay, thank you, Giles. I will try to be quick because I know we need to whiz through this. So just a few activities that I'd like to highlight that are important and ongoing now. So we're at a very important stage of design across the programme to support planning applications and also to inform further project costs, which will help us to get to a position of greater cost certainty across all project elements. We're also aware that a lot of this stage of the work isn't necessarily visible to wider stakeholders, although, of course, as Giles has mentioned, our project partners are directly involved on a daily basis. We're therefore acting to provide more regular communications and will make use of a dedicated newsletter alongside existing social media channels and the website, which are already very active. In terms of risks, there are a couple that I'd just like to highlight quickly within the report, amongst which, as Giles has alluded to, are cost pressures and programme challenges, which are not unusual with projects of this nature, and are key priorities to address working alongside our project delivery partners. To reflect such challenges, government have acknowledged the pressures that councils and local authorities are under. We have just received £70,000 worth of capacity funding from government to help accelerate the project, which we will be able to put to good use. Managing stakeholder expectations also remains a key risk, and our activities are focused on that, including taking into account feedback from stakeholders and public engagement. Some comments, as Giles has said, we've received recently have been quite polarised around certain points, and we are listening and will need to reflect on those and consider how the different perspectives can be accommodated within the evolving designs. However, the high levels of engagement to date demonstrate real interest in the design process, which is absolutely what we need to make it a success.
Thank you, Giles and Laura. Any questions, please? Councillor Burford, Councillor Burford first.
Yeah, just a quick one, Chair. A few weeks ago, when I attended a meeting about this project, which is admirable, by the way, I certainly support it, we were told by officers that there were delays by the county council in terms of their consultants who were drawing up detailed plans for the project. So has that now been resolved? Are we satisfied that the team employed by the county council are up to scratch and up to the timetable that we expect for this excellent project?
Thanks, Councillor Burfoot. The county have appointed ACOM, which is a large design consultancy with both highways and public realm experience. The project manager working on that scheme has picked up the pace, and they are moving forward well now. There was an initial delay, but things are moving forward well.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard reference to some of the social media comment on the designs that have already been put forward, and those of you who walked on Matlock Street in Bakewell will probably understand the question I'm going to ask now. Matlock Street in Bakewell is like walking along a musical xylophone, in fact. The public realm project is led by Derbyshire County Council. This council is responsible for the Ashbourne Reburn project. Can we be assured 150% that we have sufficient input and expertise on the project, whatever it's called, sub-project board, which is leading the public realm work, that this council will have sufficient input in that to ensure that the quality of the public realm improvements is such that we will be totally satisfied that it's the standard and quality and aspirations that
I mentioned in the presentation. Plus, the council has also commissioned its own client-side architectural advice, retaining an architect that was important in and led on developing the original bid submission, retaining the vision that was originally developed by the town team for a pedestrian-friendly environment, trying to reduce the dominance of cars and other vehicles through the town centre. So I think with that combination, we think we'll be able to input successfully to the work, alongside, as I say, the other members of that project control board and the designers that the county council has appointed.
Thank you. Any more questions? Anybody wish to move it? Councillor Shelley, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just before I move the 7 points, sorry, I'll get used to this eventually. The 7 points you've got in front of you that I propose to move tonight. But before I do that, I just wanted to reiterate that there's no question this is really a major achievement for the council to receive this kind of levelling up grant, and the work that's been done so far is phenomenal. I know what kind of effort goes into this. It's my line of work during the day, in fact, seeking and trying to implement grant work. I must say, though, that I do wish the government would actually address other vital levelling up needs in our area, particularly things like reclamation of abandoned quarries and support for strategic rail links, and that would be a good recognition of this kind of funding in future. But it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that we achieve a real success for this project and show that we can manage this in order to then achieve that next step of funding from the government in future, hopefully. In order to ensure that we run the Strategic Programme Board effectively to a tight timetable, democratically, taking on board those views that we know are out there, and in the spirit of keeping to the application, I'm more than happy to propose the points here and put forward David Hughes as the chair of the Ashbourne Reborn Programme Board, in addition to 3 other councillors that we appoint, and I would propose that those are Councillor Dobbs, Councillor Flitter and Councillor Lees as members. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that, Councillor Archer, find a seconder?
It does, yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Although I would love to be on the board myself. Work commitments make that difficult, and I think the people proposed are ideal. I think it's great to have Councillor Lees on there with his knowledge of the town and businesses. He's intimately involved in all that. Councillor Dobbs, in terms of his involvement with lots of local groups and his just passion campaigning for the town. And just overall, I just want to say that this is a fantastic opportunity for Ashbourne. Just listening to the debate previously about the cinema projects and so on in Matlock, I was actually at the new Ashbourne cinema last night watching Mission Impossible, and it was absolutely fantastic. It was nearly full. The cinema was nearly full. It's a brilliant new facility for the town, and it almost feels like Ashbourne started to be reborn through that, and this is the next stage, and we just got to keep that momentum going. It's fantastic, and we need to make sure that we keep driving this forward and it doesn't become our mission impossible. We want to make sure this is absolutely possible, and we don't need Tom Cruise, but we've got a good team over here. I'm sure, hopefully, won't be hanging off any trains at the end of films to get it over the line. So yeah, 100% back it. Would like to second it and fully support it, and really look forward to hearing on about the progress of it. Also like to thank the council team here and the outside providers who did a really good online workshop that was really informative, really useful recently as well, and also the engagement with the town. There will be some resistance, I'm sure, because there's a lot of people in the town who have not yet maybe disconnected the idea of a bypass with this, and that's going to be a key part in our messaging to try and make sure that people understand that this is not about the bypass, and we can't, unfortunately, get the bypass through this scheme. We're going to have to try and do that through all the means. I think that's one of the key barriers we're going to face in terms of messaging and publicity. But I think once people start to see how the town centre can be transformed by this and how it can become a much more pedestrian-friendly environment and how that can benefit our local businesses and the town centre, yet we ideally want the HGVs out of the way completely, of course we do. But this can make a massive difference. So yeah, 100%, sorry, I've waffled a bit, 100% like to second this. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go into debate, because the people who are good at mathematics will realise that there are 5 amendments on here, 5 of the recommendations on here, but Councillor Sherry amended 7. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to ask James to go quickly through them, and then we just have to go to the vote and hopefully extend a bit longer. But James, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief. So recommendations 1, 2, 4 and 5 stay the same, but recommendation 3 is effectively split in 3. So the first part of that would be that Councillors Peter Dobbs, Steve Flitter, David Hughes and Stuart Lees be appointed to the Ashbourne Reborn Programme Board to represent the District Council. So that would be 3. 4 is then that Councillor David Hughes be nominated as Chair of the Ashbourne Reborn Programme Board. And 5, that relevant partners be invited to nominate representatives to enable representation on the board to be finalised.
Thank you. Now, while you hold that thought, would anybody, because Karen sat here very patiently all evening, and I'd really feel bad if we didn't listen to what she's got to say. So would anybody be prepared to extend the meeting? Thank you. Councillor Lees, you second it. All those in favour, please. Carried. Thank you. Right. We're into debate on that matter now. Anybody wish to say anything? Councillor Lees?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, thanks for putting my name forward for this very important position within Ashbourne. And as many of you know, I've been with this from when the decline of the high streets first started. I got a meeting together with all the shopkeepers in Ashbourne, which then led to further meetings and which then become the town team. So I'm highly delighted to be involved with this. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, I just want to pay tribute again to the officers that have done marvellous here. Um, it is an important scheme. We on this side are totally behind it because it is Derbyshire Dales. We're not just talking about Matlock. We are supporting this in Ashbourne as well. I am pleased that Council Lees is joining us because we did recognise that the work he'd done from day one and he's been involved in it. And when I asked him if he'd join us, he didn't need no persuading. He wants to be there. And I think that's going to give the right impetus. And if we start to wane, I'm sure he's going to kick our heels. And so we pick up and get back on trot. But I just want to say we have been criticised, this council, in dragging our heels. If you look on page 287, you'll see the work that the officers have done. So it's not us that's dragging our heels. And I think it was brought up that there may be possible delays at the top of the hill, but there aren't here. We're going to get it done as soon as we possibly can. Thank you.
Councillor Hobson.
Yes, just briefly, Chair. As you say, as we said before, Ashbourne really did well to get this levelling up funding. We've got to work together with our county council colleagues, people at Ashbourne, everybody. There's going to be a lot of work. We're on a tight schedule. We are the accountable body, but I'm really pleased that Stuart is there and Peter, local people. I'd have loved Anthony to have been on it, but we have our elected county councillors as well, and I'm sure we'll do a good job working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers, please? Well, it's been moved and it's been seconded. So could we have all those in favour of the 7 recommendations, please? Against? Abstentions, please. So that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Right, we move on to agenda item 14. This is the provisional revenue outturn, and thank you for waiting, Karen. The report summary. This report provides details of the provisional financial outturn for the District Council's revenue spending for the year ended 31st of March 2023 and significant variations from the revised budget. So I'll hand over to Karen Henriksen, our Director of Resources, to give us the report. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. So just a brief explanation first for any new members who weren't able to attend the recent finance training that I did. Revenue expenditure is expenditure on day-to-day services. The following report about capital expenditure, that relates to expenditure on buying or improving assets, land, buildings, vehicles and so on. So both reports are linked. They both report the outturn for 22-23 financial year, and both are subject to audit, which is why they're described as provisional. So looking at the provisional revenue outturn, we're reporting an underspend of 1.957 million for 22-23. As we're short of time, I won't go into all the reasons for that. They are set out in section 1 of the report, but I will say that obviously the reasons were unforeseen at the time we set the budget, and they are mostly one-off, unfortunately. So we can't necessarily rely on having that level of underspend in future years. We're proposing that the surplus be transferred to reserves, and the particular reserves are set out in paragraph 2.4. The bulk of the surplus, £1.12 million, we're suggesting is put into the general reserve for now. That's really just to hold that funding until later in the year. Firstly, when I update the medium-term financial strategy, but also in tandem with members developing the new corporate plan, so that we can then earmark the money, take it out of the general reserve if necessary, and put it into specific reserves. And finally, we're seeking approval for some other movements in reserves that we needed to do to tidy up our year end, and they're set out in Appendix 3B. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, very much. Any questions, please? Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks for that, Karen. Excellent report. Just a very quick question, just in terms of the kind of sorry, I've got my right glasses on, so I'm going to have to read it. It's in terms of the sort of the reserves that we hold. What levels are we currently holding at to add this to? Read it right, it's 25 million.
Oh, no, sorry. It's set out in Appendix 3A to the report. So at the 31st of March 22, for example, we had £3 million in the general reserve. The chart shows that we're planning to use £369,000 in 22-23, but put in the 1.1 million, leaving a balance of 3.78 million at the 31st of March 23.
Okay, so my follow-up question is, would it not be better, rather than reserve the money, would it not be better to be looking to sort of put that into budgets for the coming year?
Yeah, that's what we will do later in the year. It didn't feel appropriate to do that now while members are developing a new corporate plan. So later in the year, when we know what the members' priorities are, where they want to focus spending, perhaps do some one-off projects, we can then allocate that in probably the 24-25 budget and take the funding out of the general reserve to finance that. We do need to be aware that use of reserves isn't sustainable, and that's why I say we might be looking at one-off projects to fund from a reserve, because obviously once you've used it, it's gone.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Wakeman.
Yeah, thank you for that, Karen. I would have expected to see this underspend a lot more, but our car parks, our machines have not been working for a year now in Bakewell. None of them have been working, so I would have expected that to be a lot higher. Thank you.
Any more questions at all? No? Oh, does this find a proposer? Councillor Hughes?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I'd like to propose this, and I think first in response to Councillor Wakeman, I think the council has been doing work on car park machines, and I put questions to council several years ago now about the failure of the machines to take cards, or the failure of the communications with the machines to enable cards to be used, and the loss of revenue that. So I think this is a recognised problem, and I hope that the methods that are now being used to allow payments through pay as you go using the web services and telephone services will enable those problems to be overcome. But perhaps those problems could be brought to the car parking working group. In moving this particular paper, I'd like to thank Karen and her team for the rigorous ways in which they manage our finances, which means that we can be confident when making decisions that require revenue or capital spend. This paper presents our current position on revenue, which demonstrates a surplus of some £2 million, 1.9 anyway, arising from the position tables on page 303. Some of this surplus comes from positive points, and Councillor Linthwaite pointed out to me earlier that red is the lucky colour in China. So I think we've adopted a Chinese method of looking at our accounts, which so there are some positive points. For example, the increased interest that we've received on our investments. But there are some points which are neutral or possibly negative. The fact that we haven't got the full complement of staff is probably a negative, because it means that we may fall behind on our services, and of course delays in implementation is a negative issue. So this paper also demonstrates the consequences of perhaps not achieving our full potential. Anyway, we're placing the surpluses into reserves, and this paper makes appropriate recommendations about which reserves are used in paragraph 2.4 on page 304. This is a technical paper, and I commend it on the basis that it will enable appropriate future use of the surplus that we've incurred, done through the corporate plan. So I recommend that I move that we approve this report and the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor O'Brien, were you wanting to second it, or you wanted? Yes. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And in seconding this report, I want to draw on the comments made, or the question raised by Councillor Whitehead, and the helpful and positive response from Karen Henriksson, and the point made by our colleague Councillor David Hughes in moving the recommendation. Now, I've raised at previous meetings the level of underspend on previous years, not just 22-23, but in previous years. And as we noted, we have an accumulation of underspends which run into the millions. These, of course, are monies raised from our residents and held in trust by the council. So I will be amongst those urging the new administration to look over the coming months at how we can use this underspend for the benefit of our residents, rather than leaving it salted away in our vaults as we've tended to do in the past. And what I hope we will do is that we will look specifically at the needs of the communities in the north and west of the district, who I know from my own experience often feel that they get relatively little back from this council in return for their council tax payments. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Any other speakers, please? No? Councillor Hughes, would you like to come back and write a reply or content? Thank you. Right, so it's been moved and it's been seconded. All those in favour of moving the three recommendations? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Move on to the final report of the evening, which is agenda item 15. It's the provisional capital outturn, the revised capital programme. This report outlines the provisional subject to audit outturn position for 22-23 and the revised capital programme for 23-24 and to 27-28. 13 new projects are proposed for inclusion in the revised programme. Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report outlines an underspend in 22-23 of £1.9 million. Most of that is due to projects being delayed and is proposed to be carried forward as slippage into 2023-24. The revised programme for 2023-24 to 2027-28, including that slippage, is recommended for approval. It's shown in detail in Appendix B so that you can see the individual projects, and totals £38.45 million, which is one of the largest capital programmes that I can recall. It does include £15 million for the Ashbourne Reborn projects that we've just heard about. We've arranged the financing of the capital programme, and that's shown in Table 8 of paragraph 2.16. And the impact of that on our reserve balances is set out in Appendix C. As you heard, the proposed capital programme includes £4.6 million for 13 new bids, which they've already been approved by the Community and Environment Committee and referred here for inclusion. A summary of each business case is set out in Appendix D. So I'm seeking members' approval of the 6 recommendations set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Do we have any questions on those 6 recommendations and Karen's report? Thank you. No, would anybody like to move those? Councillor Hughes?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to move these. This is the companion paper to the previous paper on revenue outturn, but this covers the capital outturn and capital programme for the future years of this part of this council, and noting the underspend of capital to be carried forward, and new projects that have already been agreed by the council but are therefore having to be included in the capital programme. This is a technical paper, and it reflects the financial consequences of our decisions, our past decisions, and leading to a financial position that we will need to factor in into any new calls on capital over the course of this council. And I hope that it will meet with your approval as it does with mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder, please? Councillor Wakeman? Right. We're going to debate. Is there any debate at all? Does anybody want to say anything? Councillor Bond.
Just a comment, really, Chair. I mean, this is very positive and very bold, and I think the local authority is to be applauded for this step forward. This is against the context of many local authorities currently having to pause capital investment. They're having to introduce voluntary redundancies. They're having to sell off assets, and in some cases, they're reinterpreting their statutory responsibilities in order to set a balanced budget. This authority is very different. And if we were to look at Nottingham and places like Guildford and Chelsea, Kensington, and a load of other authorities, the debt that is mounting in the local authorities that they're having to service is astronomical. And this is really to be applauded, what is happening in this authority. I just wanted to lay that on the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your positive comment. Any other people wishing to speak? Well, it's been moved and it's been seconded. So all those in favour of accepting the 6 recommendations, please raise. All those against? Any abstentions? That's carried, and that comes to the end of tonight's business, and thank you very much